Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Neighbor's Warning. Lucas Turner had always prided himself on his attention to detail. 12 years in Army intelligence had trained him to notice the smallest inconsistencies, the subtle changes that others overlooked. It was a skill that had kept him alive in 3 deployments and now served him well as a security consultant for corporate clients in Philadelphia. But somehow, he'd missed something happening in his own home. The morning started like any other Tuesday. Lucas finished his coffee while his daughter, Hannah, rushed around the kitchen gathering her backpack and lunch. At 16, she was a straight-A student at Riverside High, captain of the debate team, and generally the kind of kid who made parenting look easy. His wife, Vivian, had left earlier for her nursing shift at Pennsylvania Hospital. "Dad, I'm going to be late for first period," Hannah called out, already halfway out the door. "Drive safe, kiddo," Lucas shouted back, watching through the window as she backed her used Honda Civic out of the driveway. He was locking the front door when Randolph Lynch, their neighbor of 5 years, called out from his porch. Randy was a retired postal worker who spent most of his days tending his garden and keeping an eye on the neighborhood. Sometimes too close an eye. "Morning, Lucas," Randy said, walking over with his coffee mug. His tone carried something odd, something that made Lucas's instincts prickle. "Morning, Randy. Everything all right?" Randy glanced back at Lucas's house, then lowered his voice. "Is your daughter skipping school again?" Lucas felt his jaw tighten. "Excuse me. I don't mean to pry, but, well, I see her home during the day. A lot. Thought you should know." "Randy, Hannah goes to school every day. I drop her off or watch her leave myself." The older man shifted uncomfortably. "I'm just telling you what I see. Middle of the day, I see movement in that upstairs window. Saw someone in Hannah's room yesterday around noon. Figured it was her." Lucas forced a smile, though his mind was already racing. "Maybe you saw Vivian. She works rotating shifts." "Maybe," Randy said, but he didn't sound convinced. "Just thought you should know. These days, kids are good at hiding things." As Lucas drove to his office downtown, he couldn't shake the conversation. Randy was many things: nosy, opinionated, occasionally annoying, but he wasn't a liar. And he'd been specific. Hannah's room, middle of the day, multiple sightings. But it was impossible. Lucas had personally installed a top-tier security system on their house 2 years ago. Motion sensors, cameras on all entry points, alerts sent directly to his phone. Nothing had triggered, unless someone knew how to bypass it. At his desk, Lucas pulled up his home security app. He scrolled through the logs from the past week. Everything appeared normal. Vivian leaving for work at 5:47 a.m., Hannah departing at 7:23 a.m., Lucas at 8:15 a.m. The system armed automatically 30 seconds after the last person left. No alerts, no triggered sensors, no unauthorized entry. He checked the camera footage anyway, fast-forwarding through hours of empty rooms. Nothing. The house remained still and quiet throughout the day. But Randy's words nagged at him. Lucas had learned in the military that the absence of evidence wasn't evidence of absence. A good operator knew how to move without leaving traces. He called Riverside High's attendance office. "Hi, this is Lucas Turner, Hannah Turner's father. I need to verify her attendance for the past week." "One moment, Mr. Turner." A pause, keyboard clicking. "Hannah's record shows perfect attendance for the semester. She's currently in her 4th period class." Lucas thanked her and hung up. So Hannah was definitely at school, which meant either Randy was mistaken or someone else was in their house. That night at dinner, Lucas watched Hannah carefully. She seemed normal, complaining about her calculus teacher, excited about an upcoming debate tournament, texting her friends between bites. "Hey, Han, you haven't been coming home during lunch or anything, right?" Lucas asked casually. Hannah looked up, confused. "What? No. Why would I? We have a closed campus. Just asking. Mr. Lynch mentioned seeing someone in your room during the day." Hannah rolled her eyes. "He probably saw his own reflection or something. That man watches our house like a hawk." She returned to her phone, completely unconcerned. Vivian squeezed Lucas's hand. "Honey, maybe Randy's just bored. You know how he gets." "Maybe, But Lucas's instincts, honed through years of threat assessment, were screaming that something was wrong. After Vivian and Hannah went to bed, Lucas sat in the dark living room, thinking. Someone with the skills to bypass his security system wasn't a random burglar. They had knowledge, training. They knew the house layout, the system's blind spots. They had been in his home, in his daughter's room. The thought made his blood run cold. Lucas pulled out his laptop and began reviewing every detail of their lives. Who had access to their house? Who knew their schedules? Who had the technical knowledge to defeat a professional-grade security system? The list was short. Too short. At 2 a.m., Lucas made a decision. He would find out who was violating his home, and when he did, they would regret ever stepping foot in the Turner house. He just needed proof. Chapter 2. The Discovery. Lucas didn't sleep. Instead, he spent the night planning his surveillance operation like he was back in Baghdad, tracking insurgent cells. The next morning, he went through his normal routine: coffee, breakfast with Hannah, goodbye kiss for Vivian. He left the house at 8:15 a.m. exactly as always, climbed into his SUV, and drove away. But 2 blocks later, he circled back, parking 3 streets over in front of a small park. He grabbed his surveillance pack from the trunk, a habit from his army days, always keeping gear ready, and jogged through the backyards, approaching his house from the rear. The security system was Lucas's own design. He knew every sensor, every camera angle, every blind spot he'd deliberately programmed in. A security system with no vulnerabilities was suspicious. A system with predictable, exploitable weaknesses was a trap waiting to be sprung. He entered through the basement window, one of those deliberate blind spots, and moved silently through his own home. The house was completely still. Lucas checked every room on the ground floor. Empty. He climbed the stairs, each step placed carefully to avoid creaks. Nothing in the hallway. Nothing in the master bedroom. Hannah's room appeared untouched. Her bed was made, Vivian's insistence. Her desk organized, posters of her favorite bands on the walls. Lucas moved to the closet, then hesitated. If Randy had seen someone in this room, and they'd bypassed the security system, they were good. Which meant they might have counter-surveillance habits. They might be watching for signs of discovery. So Lucas did something unexpected. Instead of staking out from a safe distance, he slid under Hannah's bed, a narrow space he barely fit into, dust bunnies tickling his nose. From here, he had a direct view of the bedroom door and window. If someone was coming, he'd be in the last place they'd expect. The hardwood floor was uncomfortable, and the position reminded him of too many long surveillance ops in hostile territory. But Lucas had patience. He'd once spent 18 hours motionless in a crawl space in Kandahar, waiting for a high-value target. He could wait. At 10:47 a.m., Lucas heard it, the distinctive beep of the security system being disarmed. The front door opening. Someone had the code. Footsteps in the foyer. Not trying to be particularly quiet, but moving with purpose. Then more footsteps. Multiple people. Lucas's hand instinctively went to his hip, where he'd once carried a sidearm. Now it found only his phone, set to silent, recording audio. The footsteps climbed the stairs. 2 people, maybe 3. They were talking in low voices. Same as always. In and out, 30 minutes max. A woman's voice, young. Familiar somehow. I still say this is risky. What if someone comes home? A man's voice. Deeper, older. Definitely familiar. They won't. I know their schedules perfectly. Trust me. The voices were right outside Hannah's room now. Lucas's muscles tensed, his body coiled like a spring, years of combatives training ready to explode into action if needed. The door opened. 3 people entered. Lucas could only see their feet and lower legs from his position under the bed, but it was enough. Black boots expensive. Designer jeans. A woman. Work boots, paint-stained. Contractor pants. A man. Sneakers, newer. Another man, younger by the gate. They moved around the room with disturbing familiarity. Package should be in the usual spot, the woman said. Lucas heard a drawer open. Hannah's desk drawer. What the hell were they taking from his daughter's room? Got it, the younger man said. 3 kilos, just like Luther said. Lucas's blood turned to ice. Drugs. They were using his house as a drug distribution point. Perfect, the woman said. Now drop off the cash in the next shipment. Same routine. The older man's voice. This whole setup still makes me nervous, Jamie. Using a family's house. It's brilliant, and you know it, the woman, Jamie, interrupted. No one suspects a nice suburban house. Security systems on a predictable pattern. We bypass it, do the swap, and we're gone. Been working for 3 months without a hitch. 3 months. They've been violating his home, putting his daughter at risk for 3 months. Lucas recognized the voices now, and the realization hit him like a physical blow. Jamie Doherty, Vivian's younger sister, and one of the men was Luther Lambert, Jamie's boyfriend of 2 years. The other must be Luther's brother, Merle, a known associate of some very dangerous people in South Philly. His sister-in-law was running drugs through his house. Lucas remained perfectly still as they completed their exchange. He memorized every word, every detail, his mind already formulating a plan. They thought they were smart, using his home as cover. They had no idea who they were dealing with. After 30 minutes, they left, resetting the security system with what must have been a clone code. Lucas waited another 20 minutes before sliding out from under the bed. He checked Hannah's desk drawer. Inside, hidden behind school supplies, was a false bottom, one he'd never noticed. A professional installation. The drawer was empty now, but Lucas could see residue. He carefully collected samples with evidence bags from his surveillance kit. His phone had captured every word of the conversation. But Lucas didn't call the police. Not yet. Jamie had made this personal the moment she chose his home, his daughter's room, as her distribution point. She put Hannah at risk. She betrayed Vivian's trust. And Luther Lambert. Lucas knew that name from his consulting work. Luther ran with the Tanner crew, mid-level dealers who'd recently been expanding their territory. Dangerous men who didn't hesitate to use violence. If Lucas went to the police now, Jamie would lawyer up, probably get a light sentence. Luther would make bail and disappear. And worst of all, these people knew where he lived. They knew his family schedule. If they thought Lucas was a threat, retaliation wasn't just possible, it was likely. No, this required a different approach. Lucas had spent 12 years learning how to dismantle enemy operations from the inside, how to turn an adversary's strengths into weaknesses, how to make them destroy themselves. Jamie and Luther had no idea they'd just declared war on someone who'd made a career out of winning unwinnable fights. But they were about to find out. Chapter 3, Gathering Intelligence. Lucas spent the next 3 days becoming invisible in his own life. He went to work, came home, played the perfect husband and father. But every spare moment was dedicated to reconnaissance. He learned everything about Jamie Doherty. Vivian's younger sister was 28, a college dropout who'd bounced between jobs and boyfriends for years. Vivian had always made excuses for her. Difficult childhood, bad influences, just needed to find her path. Lucas had tolerated Jamie for his wife's sake, even helped her out financially a few times. That generosity had been a mistake. Now Lucas understood how Jamie knew their security code. Vivian had given it to her 6 months ago when Jamie house sat during their anniversary trip. She'd apparently studied the system carefully, found the exploitable patterns Lucas had deliberately designed to lure in sophisticated intruders, patterns Jamie had then shared with Luther. Luther Lambert was a different animal entirely. 34, with a record including assault, possession with intent to distribute, and suspected involvement in 2 unsolved shootings. He ran a distribution network across 3 neighborhoods, using violence and intimidation to maintain his territory. His older brother Merle was the muscle, 6'2", 240, known for putting people in the hospital. The Lambert brothers worked for someone bigger. Lucas's corporate security contacts helped him piece together the structure. The Tanner organization, run by Daryl Tanner, controlled drug distribution across South Philadelphia. Tanner was careful, insulated, rarely directly linked to street-level operations. Jamie and Luther were small fish in a big pond, but they were the fish who'd invaded Lucas's home. On Thursday evening, Lucas waited until Vivian was asleep, then drove to a storage unit he maintained across town. Inside were items from his military days, equipment he'd been allowed to keep or had acquired through channels that didn't ask questions. He pulled out a sophisticated surveillance setup. Wireless cameras smaller than quarters, audio bugs that could transmit for weeks, GPS trackers with magnetic mounts, and a signal interceptor that would capture phone calls and texts within a 50-foot radius. By Friday, Lucas had a complete picture of Jamie and Luther's operation. They ran a mid-level distribution network, moving product from Tanner's suppliers to street dealers. The genius of using Lucas's house was that it was in a completely different neighborhood from their usual territory, a perfect dead drop that no one would associate with drug trafficking. Jamie arrived every Tuesday and Thursday at 10:45 a.m., like clockwork. Luther or Merle would meet her with product going one direction and cash going the other. They'd modified Hannah's desk drawer themselves during one of Jamie's visits months ago. The operation was clever, but it had weaknesses. Lucas identified them methodically. Weakness 1. They'd grown comfortable, predictable. Same days, same times, same procedures. Weakness 2. Jamie trusted that family loyalty would protect her. She'd never considered that Lucas might discover the operation. Weakness 3. Luther and Merle were careful about avoiding police attention, but sloppy about operational security. They used the same phones, followed the same routes, met at the same locations. Weakness 4. The drugs moved through Lucas's house were valuable, street value around $90,000 per delivery. Luther was accountable to Tanner for that product. Weakness 5. Everyone involved assumed Lucas was just another civilian, a corporate consultant with no real skills beyond reading security reports. They had no idea what he was capable of. On Saturday, Lucas took Hannah to her debate tournament and watched her destroy her opponents with logic and evidence. She reminded him why he was doing this. Not for revenge. Revenge was emotional, sloppy. This was about protection, about ensuring his family was safe. That night, he finally told Vivian, "Not everything, but enough. I need to talk to you about Jamie," Lucas said as they sat on the back porch. Vivian looked up from her wine. "What about her? She's been coming to our house while we're at work, with her boyfriend Luther and his brother." Vivian's face registered confusion, then worry. "What? Why would?" "They're using Hannah's room as a distribution point for drugs. They modified her desk, bypassed our security system. It's been going on for 3 months. The color drained from Vivian's face. "No, Lucas, that can't." Jamie wouldn't. "I have audio recordings, video, physical evidence." Lucas kept his voice calm, factual. "I know this is hard to hear." Vivian sat in stunned silence, processing. Then tears came. "My sister? In our home? Around our daughter?" Lucas put his arm around her. "Hannah's never been in danger. They only come when everyone's gone." "But yes, we have to call the police. Right now." "No." Vivian pulled back, staring at him. "What do you mean, no?" Lucas had prepared for this conversation. "If we call the police, Jamie gets arrested, probably makes bail. Luther definitely makes bail. He's got money and lawyers. And then what? They know we turned them in. They know where we live. Luther runs with dangerous people, Vivian. People who retaliate. So we just let them." "No, we handle this differently. I have a plan that ensures they can't hurt us, can't come back, and face real consequences. But I need you to trust me." Vivian looked at her husband, really looked at him. She'd met Lucas 12 years ago, after he'd left the army. She knew about his deployments, his decorations, the nightmares he sometimes still had. She'd seen him handle threats before with a calm, calculated precision that was both reassuring and sometimes frightening. "What are you going to do?" she asked quietly. "Make sure our family is safe. Permanently." She held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, I trust you. But Lucas, promise me you'll be careful." "Always am," he said, though they both knew that wasn't quite true. What Vivian didn't know, what Lucas didn't tell her, was that his plan went far beyond simply stopping Jamie and Luther. He was going to dismantle their entire operation, turn them against each other, and ensure that when they fell hard enough that getting back up would be impossible. On Sunday, Lucas made his first move. He cloned Luther's phone using equipment from his security consulting kit, gaining access to every call, text, and email. Within hours, he had the entire network mapped. Luther's dealers, suppliers, drop points, and most importantly, his communication with Daryl Tanner. Luther was skimming. Small amounts, carefully hidden in the accounting, but definitely skimming. It would be invisible to casual observation, but obvious if someone knew where to look. Lucas smiled. He now had leverage on Luther, but he needed more. He needed to make them destroy themselves. Chapter 4. Setting the Trap. Monday morning, Lucas went to work and acted like everything was normal. But his real work was happening on encrypted networks and through carefully placed surveillance equipment. He'd learned in military intelligence that the best operations were the ones where the enemy never saw you coming. You didn't just defeat them, you made them defeat themselves. Jamie and Luther's next scheduled drop was Tuesday at 10:45 a.m. Lucas planned to be there, but not under the bed this time. This time, he was springing a trap. At 9 p.m. Monday night, Lucas received a text on the phone he'd cloned from Luther's device. It was from Daryl Tanner himself. Meeting tomorrow, 2 p.m. Warehouse. Numbers don't match. Explain. Lucas's pulse quickened. Tanner had noticed the discrepancies in Luther's accounting. This was earlier than Lucas had anticipated, but he could work with it. He quickly reviewed the data he'd collected on Luther's operation. The skimming had been going on for 6 weeks, about $15,000 total, carefully taken in small amounts from different transactions. Not enough to notice immediately, but over time, it added up. Luther responded, "We'll bring everything. Books are clean. Someone's trying to set me up. Tanner, better be. Don't be late." Lucas smiled in the darkness of his office. Luther was scared. Scared people made mistakes. Using a spoof number, Lucas sent a text to Merle Lambert pretending to be one of their street dealers. "Cops been asking questions about the Turner House drop. Think we got heat. Should we move the Tuesday delivery?" He watched through his monitoring setup as Merle's phone lit up. Merle immediately called Luther. "We got a problem," Merle said, his voice tight with tension. "Cops might be onto the house." Luther's response was angry. "What? How?" "Text from Rico. Says cops been asking about the address." "That's impossible. Place is clean. Been working perfect for months." "So what do we do?" "Tanner's already breathing down our necks about the money. We can't afford heat from cops too." Luther was silent for a moment. Lucas could almost hear the wheels turning. "We do the drop anyway," Luther finally said. "We can't miss it. Products already allocated to dealers. But we go in hard and fast. 10 minutes max. And we bring insurance." "What kind of insurance?" "The kind that makes sure if this is a setup, we walk away clean." Lucas didn't like the sound of that. Insurance, in Luther's world, usually meant weapons. This was escalating faster than he'd anticipated. He immediately adjusted his plan. At 6 a.m. Tuesday, Lucas left for work as usual. But instead of going to his office, he drove to a coffee shop 3 blocks from his house and set up his mobile surveillance station in his SUV. From here, he had access to the cameras he'd hidden throughout his house. Not the obvious security cameras that Jamie and Luther knew about, but new ones, virtually invisible, placed over the weekend while Vivian took Hannah shopping. At 10:30 a.m., a black Escalade pulled up 2 streets over. Luther and Merle got out, both visibly tense. Lucas zoomed in with his telephoto camera. Both men were armed. He could see the bulge of pistols under their jackets. This was bad. Lucas had wanted to catch them, expose them, turn them against each other. But if they came in armed and paranoid, someone could get hurt. He picked up his phone and called 911. 911, what's your emergency? I'd like to report a potential break-in in progress. 2 armed men just parked near my house, 1247 Riverside Drive. I'm out of town, but my security cameras show them approaching. They appear to be carrying weapons. Stay on the line, sir. Officers are being dispatched. I'll need to hang up. Bad signal where I am. But please hurry. My family's not home, but I'm worried about my neighbors. Lucas hung up. Police response time in this neighborhood was typically 8 to 12 minutes. Luther and Merle said they'd be in and out in 10 minutes. It was going to be close. At 10:43 a.m., Jamie's Honda pulled into the driveway. She got out, looking nervous, checking the street repeatedly. Something had her spooked. Luther and Merle approached from their parking spot. The 3 of them stood in Lucas's driveway, talking. Lucas enhanced the audio from his directional microphone. "Don't like this," Jamie was saying. "Too much heat. Maybe we should postpone." "Can't postpone," Luther snapped. "I I got Tanner meeting in 3 hours. I need this product moved and the cash in hand, or I'm screwed. What about the cops? Probably nothing, but we're prepared if it's not. They moved toward the house. Jamie entered the security code, and all three went inside. Lucas watched on his hidden cameras as they climbed the stairs to Hannah's room. His hands clenched into fists, seeing them in his daughter's face again, but he forced himself to stay calm. Emotional reactions got people killed. Jamie went straight to the desk drawer, pulling out packages wrapped in plastic. Luther counted them quickly while Merle watched the door, hand inside his jacket on his weapon. 3 kilos, like always, Jamie said. Now, give me the cash and the next shipment. Luther handed over a duffel bag. Count it later. We need to move. That's when they heard the sirens. Lucas watched their faces change from focused to panicked in an instant. What the hell? Luther spun toward the window. 2 police cruisers were pulling up outside, lights flashing. It's a setup. Merle yanked out his pistol. Someone ratted. Put that away. Jamie hissed. If they see guns. Everyone stay calm, Luther ordered, but his own hand was on his weapon. We don't know they're here for us. A voice boomed through a megaphone outside. This is the Philadelphia police. We received a report of armed intruders. Anyone inside, come out with your hands visible. Luther's face went white. He turned to Jamie with fury in his eyes. You set us up. You call the cops. What? No, I would never. Then how'd they know we were armed? How'd they know to come right when we're here? The truth dawned on Jamie's face. Lucas. Oh my God, Lucas knows. Your brother-in-law. Merle kept his gun pointed at the door. How would he? He's not just some consultant. He was Army intelligence. If he figured out we were using his house. Luther grabbed Jamie by the arm. Did you tell him anything? No, I swear. I've been careful. Downstairs, someone was knocking on the door. Police. Open up. Lucas watched the scene unfold, his mind racing. This wasn't going exactly as planned. He'd wanted them caught with the drugs, but the weapons changed everything. If this went violent, he made a decision and called 911 again. This is Lucas Turner. I called about the break-in at 1247 Riverside. I'm accessing my security cameras remotely. There are 3 people inside. One is my sister-in-law, Jamie Doherty. The 2 men are Luther and Merle Lambert. They're armed but surrounded. Please, I don't want anyone hurt. Jamie's made some bad choices, but she's family. The operator relayed the information. Lucas could hear it being passed to the officers on scene through their radios on his police scanner. Inside the house, Luther was making calculations. We're trapped. Cops outside, drugs in hand, armed. We're looking at serious time. Unless, Merle said slowly, we had a hostage. Jamie backed away. Don't even think about it. She's right, Luther said, but his voice was uncertain. That only makes it worse. A new voice came through the megaphone. Jamie Doherty, this is Sergeant Wes Daniels. Your brother-in-law Lucas called us. He says you're family, and he doesn't want anyone hurt. Neither do we. Come out peacefully. We can work this out. Jamie looked at Luther and Merle. He's given me a chance. Us a chance. If we go out now, maybe nothing, Luther snarled. We're caught. With product. With weapons. Your brother-in-law screwed us, and you're worried about chances? But Lucas could see Luther's resolve cracking. He was a mid-level dealer, not a hardened criminal. The reality of a standoff with police was hitting him. Lucas made another call, this time directly to the police command on scene, using his corporate security credentials that gave him access to law enforcement channels. This is Lucas Turner, security consultant. I have audio and video surveillance of the interior. The suspects are in the northeast bedroom, 2nd floor. They're scared, arguing amongst themselves. I believe they'll surrender if given the opportunity. Mr. Turner, we appreciate the intel, but you need to stay clear. Understand. But Sergeant, I'm former Army intelligence. I know how to read people. Luther Lambert is the leader, and he's calculating odds right now. If you offer him a way out that doesn't involve violence, he'll take it. His brother Merle is more volatile, but he follows Luther's lead. And Jamie, she's in over her head. She'll surrender first if encouraged. There was a pause. Noted. We'll handle it from here. Lucas watched as the police strategy shifted. Instead of demanding they come out, Sergeant Danielle's voice became conversational. Luther, I know you're thinking this through. Smart guy like you knows the math. Right now, you're looking at possession with intent. Serious, but manageable with good lawyers. You start adding charges, weapons, assault on officers, kidnapping if you do something stupid with Jamie, and you're looking at decades. Not years. Decades. Is that worth it? Inside the bedroom, Lucas saw Luther's shoulders slump. Merle was still tense, but Luther was breaking. Your brother-in-law doesn't want to press charges for the break-in, Daniels continued. He just wants his house back. You walk out now, nice and easy, we can maybe work with that. But you force our hand, and all bets are off. Luther looked at the drugs on the bed, then at his brother, then at Jamie. This is on you, he said to Jamie. Your family. Your problem. Then he pulled out his pistol, ejected the magazine, and set it on the floor. Merle, after a moment's hesitation, did the same. We're coming out, Luther shouted. Don't shoot. Lucas exhaled. No bloodshed. That was critical, because the real game was just beginning. As police brought Jamie, Luther, and Merle out in handcuffs, Lucas watched from his SUV 3 blocks away. The drugs were being inventoried, the weapons secured, the suspects being read their rights. But this wasn't the end. This was just the opening move. Because in 2 hours, Luther was supposed to meet with Daryl Tanner and explain the discrepancies in his accounting. Except now, Luther wouldn't be there, and the 3 kilos of Tanner's product would be in police evidence lockup. Tanner was going to be very interested in what happened to his distribution network, and Lucas was going to make sure Tanner's attention went exactly where Lucas wanted it. Chapter 5. Turning the Screws. Lucas sat in a parking garage overlooking the police station, monitoring multiple phone lines through his intercept equipment. Jamie, Luther, and Merle were inside being processed, and the real operation was about to begin. At 1:47 p.m., Luther's lawyer arrived, a slick defense attorney named Gerard Pearson who specialized in drug cases. Lucas recognized him from his corporate security work. Pearson was expensive and effective, which meant Luther had resources backing him. Resources that would evaporate once Lucas was done. At 2:15 p.m., Luther missed his meeting with Daryl Tanner. Lucas watched through the clone phone as angry texts started coming through. Tanner, where are you? 10 minutes later, answer your phone. Now, at 2:45 p.m., you have 1 hour to explain what happened, or we have problems. Lucas waited until exactly 3:30 p.m., then sent a text from an anonymous burner phone to Tanner's number, a number he'd extracted from Luther's communications. Your boy Luther got popped. 3 keys of your product in evidence. Check the news. He attached a link to the local news story that had just posted online. 3 arrested in suburban drug bust. Within 30 seconds, Tanner called the number. Lucas didn't answer. Through his monitoring of police communications, Lucas learned that Luther, Merle, and Jamie were all being held pending arraignment. Luther's lawyer was negotiating, but the charges were serious. Possession with intent to distribute, criminal trespass, weapons charges for Luther and Merle. Jamie was the weak link. Lucas could see it in the police interview footage he'd obtained through his security industry contacts. She was terrified, crying, asking about deals. At 4 p.m., Lucas made a call to Gerard Pearson's office from another burner phone, using voice modulation software. Mr. Pearson, you represent Luther Lambert. Who is this? Someone who knows Luther's been stealing from Daryl Tanner. About $15,000 over the past 6 weeks. Tanner's already suspicious. When he finds out Luther lost 3 kilos of product to the cops, he's going to do the math. Your client has maybe 48 hours before Tanner decides Luther's a liability. I don't know what you are. Check Luther's books. The money's hidden in false receipts from his cousin's auto shop. When Tanner audits, and he will audit, it'll take him about an hour to find it. Luther's going to need protection. Witness protection. Tell him to think about cooperation. Lucas hung up before Pearson could respond. The seed was planted. Luther would soon realize he had enemies on both sides now, the law and his own organization. That evening, Lucas visited the police station. Sergeant Daniels met him in a conference room. Mr. Turner, I appreciate your cooperation today. Your surveillance footage is solid evidence. Happy to help, Sergeant. I just want my home back. About that, Your sister-in-law is asking to speak with you. Lucas had expected this. I'll talk to her. Briefly, Jamie was brought to a visitor room, still and holding clothes, her eyes red from crying. When she saw Lucas, she stood up. Lucas, I'm so sorry. I never meant. Sit down, Jamie. His voice was calm, but carried an edge that made her sink back in her chair. You used our home, Hannah's room. For months, you put my daughter at risk. She was never at risk. We were careful. We only came when you brought armed criminals into my house. Lucas leaned forward. Luther and Merle came in carrying pistols today, in my daughter's bedroom. So don't tell me about risk. Jamie's face crumpled. I didn't know they bring guns. That was Luther's idea after. She stopped. After what? After someone spooked them about cops watching the house. She looked at Lucas with dawning understanding. That was you. You set this whole thing up. I made sure you got caught before someone got hurt. There's a difference. Please, Lucas. I know I screwed up, but if I cooperate, if I testify against Luther, can you help me? Talk to the prosecutor? Lucas pretended to consider it. That depends. What do you know about Luther's organization? About Daryl Tanner? Over the next 30 minutes, Jamie told Lucas everything. Locations, names, procedures, the whole distribution network. She was desperate to reduce her charges, willing to give up anyone to save herself. Lucas recorded every word on his phone, hidden in his jacket pocket. When she finished, Lucas stood. I'll talk to my lawyer. See what can be done. Thank you, Lucas. Thank you. And please, tell Vivian I'm sorry. Tell her. Vivian doesn't want to hear from you right now. Maybe ever. You betrayed her trust. As Lucas left the station, he had everything he needed. Jamie had just given him a complete map of a criminal organization. Combined with the evidence from Luther's phone and his own surveillance, Lucas could dismantle the entire Tanner network. But he wasn't going to give it to the police. Not yet. He was going to use it as ammunition in a war he was about to start. That night, Lucas created a comprehensive dossier. Financial records, supplier contacts, distribution routes, names of corrupt officials taking payoffs, locations of drug houses, everything. He organized it into a professional intelligence report, the kind he used to create for military operations. Then he made copies. Multiple copies, encrypted and stored in different locations. At 11 p.m., Lucas made another anonymous call, this time to Ramon Haley, Tanner's biggest competitor in the Philadelphia drug trade. Haley ran operations in North Philly and had been trying to expand into Tanner's territory for years. Mr. Haley, you don't know me, but I have information about Daryl Tanner's operation. Weaknesses in his distribution network, locations of his stash houses, financial records showing which cops and officials he's paying off. Who the hell is this? Someone who wants to see Tanner's empire crumble. I'm sending you a sample of the intelligence. If you're interested in the rest, we can negotiate terms. Lucas sent over one document, the location and schedule of one of Tanner's major distribution points. Enough to be valuable, not enough to give away the whole game. Why would you help me? Haley asked suspiciously. Because Tanner made a mistake. He targeted the wrong person's family. Now I'm returning the favor. You want his territory? I'm giving you the keys to take it. All I ask in return is that when this is over, you remember whose neighborhood I live in, and you keep your business far away from it. There was a long pause. Send me the rest of the intel. I'll look it over. When I see you make a move on the location I just sent, I'll know you're serious. Then we'll talk about the rest. Lucas hung up. Within 24 hours, Haley's crew hit the distribution point Lucas had identified. They took $200,000 in product and cash. Tanner's organization was suddenly under attack from a rival who had impossibly detailed intelligence. Lucas monitored Tanner's communications through the network he'd penetrated via Luther's phone. The organization was in chaos. Tanner didn't know how Haley had gotten the intel, whether there was a rat in his organization, whether Luther had talked from jail. The paranoia was exactly what Lucas wanted. On Thursday, Lucas sent Tanner's financial records, the one showing exactly how much Luther had stolen, to Tanner's second-in-command, Patrick Rice, with a simple message. Luther's been skimming. Check the books. And ask yourself why he got caught so conveniently at the exact moment he owed you an explanation. Patrick would do the math. Luther had motive to set up the bust, destroy the evidence of his theft, claim he got busted in a random sting, avoid Tanner's wrath. Except the paranoia would work both ways. Luther, sitting in jail, would soon hear about Haley's attack on Tanner's operations. He'd realize someone had fed Haley intelligence, and there were only a few people who had that level of detailed knowledge. Luther would suspect Tanner of setting him up. Tanner would suspect Luther of working with Haley. Jamie would be caught in the middle, terrified and trying to save herself. They would destroy each other, and Lucas wouldn't have to do anything except watch. By Friday morning, Lucas's lawyer contacted the prosecutor with an offer. Lucas wouldn't press breaking and entering charges against his sister-in-law in exchange for Jamie's full cooperation against Luther and Merle Lambert. The prosecutor agreed. Jamie was released on bail with an ankle monitor, terrified and isolated, cut off from her co-conspirators, and facing serious time if she didn't cooperate. Luther and Merle, meanwhile, remained in custody. Their lawyer was scrambling, trying to negotiate deals, but Tanner's organization had gone silent. No bail money, no support, nothing. They were being cut off because Tanner didn't support snitches. And the rumors Lucas was carefully spreading made it seem like Luther was cooperating to save himself. On Saturday, Lucas finally visited Luther in jail. He paid for a private attorney conference room, presenting himself as a concerned citizen who wanted to understand what happened. Luther came in wearing orange, looking exhausted and angry. "The hell do you want?" Luther growled. "To give you a chance to survive," Lucas said calmly. "In about 72 hours, Daryl Tanner is going to decide whether you're worth keeping alive. Right now, his operation is under attack. Someone, probably Ramon Haley, has detailed intelligence about his network. Products being stolen, stash houses getting hit, cops suddenly showing up at exactly the right times. Tanner thinks he has a rat." Luther's face went pale. "I didn't. I know you didn't. But Tanner doesn't. He knows you were skimming money. He knows you lost 3 kilos to the cops. He knows you're in custody facing serious charges. From his perspective, you look like a man who'd cut a deal. I'm not cooperating. Tell him. I'm not your messenger. I'm your wake-up call." Lucas leaned forward. "You have one chance to get out of this alive. You testify against Tanner. You give the feds everything. Distribution network, supplier contacts, money laundering, all of it. You go into witness protection. You disappear. Because if you don't, Tanner will make sure you don't make it to trial." Luther stared at him. "Who the hell are you? You're not just some security consultant. I'm the man whose home you violated, whose daughter you put at risk. And now I'm the man who's tearing down everyone connected to that decision. Daryl Tanner, Ramon Haley, your whole network. When I'm done, the streets you ran will be crawling with federal agents and rival crews. You want to survive? You cooperate. That's your only play." Lucas stood to leave. "Wait," Luther said. "You set all this up. The bust, Haley's attacks, everything. This is you." Lucas paused at the door. "I'm just a concerned citizen who got caught in the crossfire of your world. But if that world burns down around you, I won't lose sleep." He left Luther sitting there, the weight of reality crushing down on him. By Monday, Luther's lawyer contacted the FBI. Luther wanted to make a deal. Chapter 6, Controlled Demolition. The FBI moved fast once Luther started talking. Special Agent Jared Howard, a 20-year veteran of the Bureau's Organized Crime Division, took over the case. Lucas had worked with Howard 3 years ago on a corporate espionage case and knew he was thorough and ruthless when it came to dismantling criminal organizations. Lucas made sure Howard got a copy of his intelligence dossier, carefully sanitized to remove any indication of how Lucas had obtained it, presented as information gathered through corporate security channels during a routine home invasion investigation. Howard called Lucas personally. "This is solid intel, better than anything we've gotten from informants. How does a security consultant get this level of detail?" "I'm very good at my job," Lucas said. "And I had motivation. They used my house. Still, this is FBI-level analysis. You sure you didn't miss your calling? Did 12 years of it in the Army. This is just a different uniform." Howard laughed. "Fair enough. Listen, with what you've provided and Luther's cooperation, we can take down the entire Tanner organization. We're talking RICO charges, 30-plus defendants. This is big. Just make sure my family stays safe when it goes down. Protective detail is already on your house. These guys don't know it was you who started the ball rolling. But Lucas knew better. Eventually, someone would connect the dots, which was why he was already 3 steps ahead. While the FBI built their case against Tanner, Lucas was orchestrating the final moves of his own operation. He'd identified every weakness in the criminal network, every point of leverage, every rivalry and grudge. And he was exploiting all of them simultaneously. Anonymous tips went to the DEA about Tanner's suppliers. Financial records landed on the desk of the IRS. Evidence of bribes reached internal affairs for 3 different police departments. Simultaneously, Lucas was feeding intelligence to Ramon Haley, watching as Haley's crews systematically dismantled Tanner's street operations. It was a controlled demolition, and Lucas was the demolition expert. On Tuesday, Jamie came to the house. Vivian had reluctantly agreed to see her, though Lucas made sure he was present. Jamie looked terrible, pale, thin, dark circles under her eyes. The ankle monitor was visible under her jeans. "I'm so sorry," Jamie began, tears already flowing. "I never meant for any of this." "You put our daughter at risk," Vivian said coldly. "You used our home for drug trafficking. For 3 months, Jamie. 3 months you smiled to our faces while." I know. I was desperate. Luther said it was safe, that no one would ever know. I needed the money, and he made it sound so easy." "You chose money over family," Lucas said. "Over Hannah's safety. That's not desperation. That's betrayal." Jamie collapsed into sobs. "I'm cooperating with everything. The FBI, the prosecutor, all of it. I told them everything I know. My lawyer says if I testify, I might get probation instead of prison." "Lucas, please, can you tell them I'm trying to make this right?" Lucas exchanged a look with Vivian. His wife's face was hard, unforgiving. "I'll speak to the prosecutor," Lucas said finally. "But, Jamie, you need to understand something. Even if you avoid prison, you're not welcome here anymore. Not in our home. Not around Hannah. You made choices that broke this family." "But we're sisters," Jamie pleaded to Vivian. "You stopped being my sister when you decided drugs were more important than my child's safety," Vivian said quietly. "Get out, Jamie, and don't come back." After Jamie left, Vivian broke down. Lucas held her while she cried, for the sister she'd lost, for the betrayal, for the violation of their home. "She's facing years of looking over her shoulder," Vivian said between tears. "Luther's people, Tanner's organization, they won't forget she cooperated." "Neither will I," Lucas said. "But she made her bed. We need to focus on protecting our family now." That night, Lucas received a call from an unknown number. He answered using his voice recording app. "Mr. Turner?" An older voice, smooth and controlled. "Who's asking?" "Someone who appreciates good intelligence work. You've been quite busy." Lucas's blood ran cold. He recognized the voice from surveillance recordings. "Daryl Tanner. I don't know what you're talking about. Please. I'm not stupid." Luther flips. "My network gets hit from 3 directions simultaneously. My financial records end up with the IRS. And somehow Ramon Haley has better intel about my operation than my own people. That doesn't happen by accident. Someone orchestrated this. Your problem is with your organization, not me." "My problem," Tanner said, his voice hardening, "is that a civilian security consultant apparently decided to play at being some kind of vigilante. Do you have any idea who you're dealing with?" "I know exactly who I'm dealing with. A mid-level drug dealer whose entire operation is collapsing. The FBI has your financial records, your distribution network, your supplier contacts. Luther's testifying. Jamie's testifying. Half your crew is under surveillance, and the other half is getting poached by Haley. You're done, Tanner. It's just a matter of time. You think the FBI protects you? You think I can't reach you? I think you're smart enough to know that I'm not a target worth the consequences. I'm a decorated veteran with corporate security clients, including 2 Fortune 500 companies. I have surveillance footage of your people breaking into my home, threatening my family. You come after me, and every law enforcement agency in Pennsylvania will make your life their personal mission. Is that really how you want to spend your last months of freedom?" There was a long silence. "You don't know what you started," Tanner said finally. "Yes, I do. I started the end of your organization, and I'll sleep just fine knowing it. Lucas hung up and immediately called Agent Howard. Tanner just threatened me directly. I recorded the call. Send it over. That's another charge we can add. Witness intimidation. Lucas forwarded the recording, then activated additional security protocols on his house. Motion sensors, panic buttons, direct links to 911 and Howard's direct line. He also moved Vivian and Hannah to a hotel for the next week, using a corporate security safe house. If Tanner was desperate enough to make threats, he might be desperate enough to act. But Lucas had planned for that too. On Wednesday, the FBI executed simultaneous raids on 18 locations connected to Tanner's organization. Arrests were made, millions in cash and drugs seized, financial records confiscated. The operation made national news. And in the chaos, something interesting happened. Daryl Tanner disappeared. His lawyer claimed he'd gone into hiding, fearing for his safety from rival organizations. But Lucas knew better. He'd been monitoring Tanner's communications, his movements, his resources. Tanner had run, taken what cash he could grab, and fled, which meant he was scared, desperate, and dangerous. On Thursday night, Lucas was in his SUV outside the hotel where Vivian and Hannah were staying when his phone pinged with an alert from his home security system. Someone was approaching the house. Lucas pulled up the camera feeds. 3 men, all armed, moving toward his back door. Professional movements coordinated. Tanner had sent a crew. Lucas smiled grimly and made 2 phone calls. The first to 911. Armed intruders breaking into 1247 Riverside Drive. I'm out of town, but my security system shows 3 men with weapons. The second to Agent Howard. Tanner just sent shooters to my house. You might want to be there when the cops arrive. Then Lucas activated a surprise he'd installed over the past week. A remotely triggered alarm system that sent 120 decibel sirens throughout the house, along with strobe lights in every room. On his camera feeds, he watched the 3 intruders panic as the house erupted in noise and light. They scattered, running for the back fence. But Lucas had planned for that too. He'd set up motion-activated cameras throughout the backyard, capturing clear footage of all 3 men. Police arrived in 4 minutes. The FBI showed up right behind them. 2 of the 3 intruders were caught within blocks. The third was identified from footage and arrested 6 hours later. All 3 had records. All 3 had connections to Tanner. And all 3 were now facing serious felony charges: burglary, criminal trespass, weapons violations, and conspiracy to commit assault. One of them, the one they caught first, started talking within an hour. Tanner had ordered the hit. Not to kill Lucas, but to send a message. Destroy the house. Make it clear what happened when someone interfered. It was exactly the evidence Agent Howard needed to add witness intimidation and conspiracy charges to Tanner's indictment. By Friday morning, federal marshals had tracked Tanner to a motel in Delaware. He was arrested trying to board a bus to Canada. The news coverage was extensive. Drug kingpin arrested after ordering hit on suburban home. Lucas's name was mentioned as the victim, which wasn't ideal, but it also made him untouchable now. Going after Lucas would bring down so much law enforcement attention that no one would dare. That evening, Agent Howard met Lucas at a coffee shop. "You played this perfectly," Howard said. "It's like you anticipated every move. I did 12 years of intelligence work. I know how to read patterns. This was more than reading patterns. This was orchestration. You didn't just react to what happened. You guided it. Made them all destroy each other." Lucas sipped his coffee. "They destroyed themselves. I just made sure the right people were watching when it happened." Howard studied him. "You know, the Bureau could use someone with your skills. We're always looking for analysts who understand criminal psychology. I'm happy consulting, Agent Howard. Less bureaucracy." "Fair enough." Howard slid a folder across the table. "This is the final tally. 37 arrests across the Tanner organization. RICO charges against 12 defendants, including Tanner himself. Conservative estimate is we've disrupted about $40 million in annual drug distribution. And it all started because they were dumb enough to use your house." "What about Luther and Jamie?" "Luther's cooperating fully. He'll do minimal time, probably 5 years with credit for cooperation. Witness protection after that." Jamie's looking at probation and community service. She wasn't directly involved in distribution, just provided access. The judge will be lenient given her cooperation and family circumstances. And Tanner, 25 to life minimum, with the witness intimidation charges and the attempted hit on your house. He's never seeing freedom again. Lucas nodded slowly. Justice served, but not quite the way he'd envisioned. One more thing, Howard said. Ramon Haley. He's been awfully successful lately, hitting Tanner's operations with suspiciously accurate intelligence. You wouldn't know anything about that. I gave you everything I had, Agent Howard. That's what I thought. Because if someone was feeding intel to Haley, that would be a crime. And I'd hate to see a decorated veteran get caught up in something like that. Understandable. Howard stood. Well, Mr. Turner, thanks for your cooperation. And my advice? Take your family on a vacation. Somewhere far from Philadelphia. Let all this blow over. Good advice. I think I will. As Howard left, Lucas allowed himself a small smile. Tanner's organization was destroyed. Luther was contained. Jamie had learned an expensive lesson. His family was safe. But there was still one loose end. Ramon Haley had the rest of Lucas's intelligence dossier. And eventually, Haley would want something in return for staying away from Lucas's neighborhood. Lucas had already planned for that conversation. Because the real lesson from all this wasn't about revenge or justice. It was about leverage, about understanding that power came from information, preparation, and the willingness to do what others wouldn't. Lucas had spent 12 years learning those lessons in war zones around the world. Now he just finished teaching them to everyone who'd made the mistake of threatening his family. Chapter 7. The Final Player. 2 weeks after Tanner's arrest, life began returning to something resembling normal. Hannah was back at school, excited about being accepted to Penn State's honors program. Vivian had returned to work, though she still sometimes looked at their house with a mixture of violation and relief. The physical evidence of what had happened was gone. Lucas had replaced the modified desk drawer, upgraded the security system, and hired a professional cleaning service to make Hannah's room feel new again. But the consequences rippled through their lives in subtle ways. Jamie had pleaded guilty to accessory charges and received 3 years probation, 300 hours of community service, and mandatory drug counseling. She'd moved to Pittsburgh to live with an aunt, far from Philadelphia and the wreckage of her old life. Vivian had spoken to her once since the sentencing, a brief, painful conversation that ended with both sisters crying. Luther was in federal protective custody, preparing to testify in the RICO case against Tanner and a dozen other defendants. Merle had taken a plea deal and was serving 8 years. And Tanner himself sat in a federal detention center, denied bail, facing a trial that would likely end with him dying in prison. Lucas should have felt satisfied. The threat was eliminated, his family safe, justice served. But he knew it wasn't over. On a Thursday evening, Lucas was working in his home office when an encrypted message appeared on his secure email, the one he used for his consulting business. We should talk about our arrangement. Meet me tomorrow at 8 p.m. Details to follow. It was signed simply, R.H. Ramon Haley. Lucas had been expecting this. He'd given Haley intelligence worth millions of dollars in seized territory and product. Haley had used it to expand his operation into the vacuum left by Tanner's collapse. And now Haley wanted to discuss payment. The next message arrived an hour later with an address, a warehouse in North Philadelphia, deep in Haley's territory. Vivian noticed Lucas's tension at dinner. Everything okay? Just work stuff. I have a meeting tomorrow night with a client. Late meeting? It's a security consultation. Some people prefer after hours. It wasn't exactly a lie. But Lucas had learned during this whole operation that protecting Vivian meant not telling her everything. She knew about Jamie and Luther, about Tanner's organization. But she didn't know about Haley, about the intelligence Lucas had traded, about the criminal empire he'd helped build in exchange for his family's safety. That night, Lucas prepared like he was going on a combat patrol. He wore a concealed ballistic vest under his jacket, carried 2 phones, one regular, one encrypted, had a tracking device in his watch that would alert Agent Howard if Lucas didn't deactivate it within 4 hours, left detailed files on his computer about Haley's organization, set to automatically email to the FBI if Lucas didn't log in by midnight. If Haley decided Lucas was a liability rather than an asset, Lucas would make sure his death meant Haley's arrest. At 7:45 p.m., Lucas drove into North Philadelphia. The neighborhood was a different world from Riverside. Boarded-up buildings, graffiti, people on corners watching cars pass with predatory attention. The warehouse was in an industrial area, surrounded by chain-link fence topped with razor wire. Two men stood outside, both obviously armed. Lucas parked and approached slowly, hands visible. "Lucas Turner." "I'm expected." One of the men spoke into a radio, then nodded. Inside. Second floor. The warehouse was dim, filled with shipping containers and pallets. Lucas's military training automatically mapped exits and cover points. Three more armed men on the ground floor. Camera in the northeast corner. Steel stairs leading up. On the second floor, Ramon Haley sat behind a desk in what had been converted into an office. He was in his late 40s, well-dressed in expensive casual wear, looking more like a successful businessman than a drug dealer, which Lucas supposed was exactly what he was. "Mr. Turner, thank you for coming." Haley gestured to a chair. "Drink." "I'm fine." Haley poured himself whiskey from a crystal decanter. "You're a careful man. I respect that. The vest, the tracking device in your watch, the dead man's switch on your computer files. Very professional." Lucas kept his expression neutral. "You knew I'd take precautions." "Of course. I'd be disappointed if you didn't." Haley sat down. "The intelligence you provided was exceptional. Tanner's organization collapsed in 3 weeks. I've expanded into 4 new territories. Conservative estimate is my operations grown 30% since we started our arrangement. Glad I could help. Which brings us to compensation. You asked me to keep my business away from your neighborhood. I've honored that. But you gave me intelligence worth millions. That deserves reciprocation. I told you what I wanted. My neighborhood stays clean. That was the deal." Haley smiled. "That was the initial deal. But I'm a businessman, Mr. Turner. I invest in valuable assets. And you're a very valuable asset." Lucas's instincts screamed warning. "I'm not interested in working for you. Not working for me. Working with me." Haley leaned forward. "You have skills, intelligence gathering, strategic planning, security expertise. I have resources and reach. Together, we could build something remarkable. Protection services for high-value clients. Corporate security with real teeth. Perfectly legal consulting work that happens to benefit from certain insights. You want me to be your intelligence officer. I want you to be a partner in a legitimate security consulting firm that occasionally handles sensitive situations. You'd make more money than your current corporate clients pay. You'd have access to resources that would make your work easier. And most importantly, you'd have my absolute guarantee that your family remains untouched by this world." Lucas understood the unspoken threat. Right now, Haley was offering partnership, but if Lucas refused, that offer could become leverage. Haley knew about Lucas's role in destroying Tanner. He had evidence of Lucas providing intelligence to a criminal organization. If Lucas walked away, Haley could destroy him. "I need to think about it," Lucas said carefully. "Of course. Take a week. But Mr. Turner understands something." Haley's voice hardened. "We have an arrangement now, whether you want it or not. You involve yourself in this world when you decided to feed me intel. You can either profit from that involvement, or you can become a problem that needs solving. Your choice." Lucas drove home in silence, his mind racing through scenarios and responses. Haley had outplayed him. Lucas had been so focused on destroying Tanner that he hadn't fully considered the consequences of empowering Haley. Now Haley owned him, unless Lucas could find a way out. At home, Lucas went straight to his office and began working. He pulled up everything he had on Haley's operation, the intelligence he'd gathered while investigating Tanner, the new information from their meeting, patterns, and vulnerabilities. There had to be a weakness. There always was. At 2 a.m., Lucas found it. Haley's expansion had been rapid, too rapid. He'd absorbed Tanner's territory, but hadn't fully consolidated control. Some of Tanner's old dealers had switched allegiance to Haley, but their loyalty was mercenary. They'd work for whoever paid best. And Haley's suppliers. Lucas had those names from the intel he'd collected. They were independent operators who sold to whoever had cash. They didn't care about territory or loyalty. More importantly, Haley's operation was now large enough to attract serious federal attention. The same DEA and FBI agents who'd taken down Tanner will be looking at who filled the vacuum. Lucas began formulating a plan. Not to destroy Haley. That would be too obvious, too risky. But to make Haley decide that Lucas was more valuable as a friendly independent than as a coerced partner. The key was leverage. Lucas needed something that made him more dangerous to pressure than to leave alone. Over the next 3 days, Lucas worked in secret. He compiled a comprehensive intelligence package on Haley's organization. Everything from supplier networks to distribution routes to corrupted officials. He identified 5 major operations that would cripple Haley's network if disrupted. Then he created a sophisticated dead man's switch. If Lucas failed to log into a specific encrypted server every 72 hours, the intelligence package would automatically be sent to the FBI, DEA, and every major news outlet in Philadelphia. But he also created an insurance policy. He documented his own involvement in feeding intelligence to Haley, presented as a counterintelligence operation to gather evidence on both Tanner and Haley simultaneously. He had Agent Howard's contact information, records of their cooperation on the Tanner case, even recordings of Haley's implied threats. If Lucas disappeared or had an accident, the evidence would paint him as an intelligence asset working to infiltrate criminal organizations, and Haley as the criminal who killed a federal cooperator. It wasn't perfect, but it made Lucas toxic to eliminate. On the 6th day, Lucas drove back to Haley's warehouse. Same guards, same setup. But this time, Lucas wasn't nervous. Haley looked up as Lucas entered. "Mr. Turner, have you considered my offer?" "I have, and I'm going to decline." Haley's expression darkened. "That's disappointing. I thought we understood each other." "We do, which is why I'm going to explain exactly why forcing me in a partnership would be a mistake." Lucas pulled out his phone and brought up a file. "This is a comprehensive intelligence package on your organization. Supplier networks, distribution routes, financial records, corrupted officials. Everything the FBI would need to do to you what they did to Tanner." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm explaining the reality of our situation. This intelligence package is on a dead man's switch. Every 72 hours, I have to log into a secure server to prevent automatic distribution to law enforcement. If I'm killed, arrested, or disappeared, your operation collapses within days." Haley's jaw clenched. "So you want to hold this over my head forever?" "No, I want mutually assured destruction, because I also compiled documentation of my role in providing you intelligence against Tanner. If you expose me, I expose you. If I expose you, you expose me. Neither of us can move against the other without destroying ourselves. That's not partnership. That's a standoff." "Exactly. Which brings me to my actual proposal." Lucas leaned forward. "You stay out of my neighborhood. You never contact my family. You never ask me for intelligence or favors. In exchange, I don't actively work against your organization. I maintain the dead man's switch to protect myself, but I don't proactively share anything with law enforcement. So I get nothing from this arrangement. You get me not destroying your operation, and you get peace of mind that I'm not working for the FBI to bring you down. Because if I were, you'd already be arrested." Haley stared at Lucas for a long moment. "You're playing a dangerous game. I learned from the best. You show me how leverage works. Now I'm using that lesson." Finally, Haley laughed, a genuine, appreciative sound. "You've got balls, Turner. I'll give you that. Most people in your position would just run or cooperate. You're negotiating. I'm establishing boundaries. I protected my family from Tanner. Now I'm protecting them from you. Nothing personal, just business." Haley considered this. "All right, we have a deal. Mutually assured destruction. You stay out of my way, I stay out of yours. But Turner, if you ever change your mind about cooperation, the offer stands. A man with your skills could go far in my organization. I'll keep that in mind." As Lucas left the warehouse, he felt the weight lifting. It wasn't perfect. He'd have to maintain the dead man's switch indefinitely, always looking over his shoulder. But his family was safe. The threat was contained. He'd won by making himself not worth the cost of fighting. Sometimes the best victory was the one where nobody died. Chapter 8. Confrontation and Truth. 3 weeks after his meeting with Haley, Lucas was settling into a new normal. The dead man's switch ran automatically in the background of his life. A simple weekly login that took 30 seconds. Haley's organization stayed far from Riverside. The neighborhood remained quiet. But Lucas knew that peace built on threats was fragile. On a Saturday morning, Lucas was in the garage working on Hannah's car when Agent Howard called. "Lucas, we need to talk." In person. The tone made Lucas's instincts flare. "About what?" "Not over the phone. Can you meet me at the office in an hour?" Lucas found Howard in a secure conference room at the FBI field office. The agent looked tired, frustrated. "We've got a problem," Howard said without preamble. "Ramon Haley." Lucas kept his face neutral. "What about him?" "He's expanded significantly since Tanner went down. Absorbed most of Tanner's old territory, recruited some of his dealers, basically took over as the new major player in South Philly drug distribution." "I wouldn't know about that." Howard slid a folder across the table. "This is surveillance footage from various operations over the past month. Haley's crew hitting Tanner's old distribution points with almost supernatural accuracy. Like they had detailed intelligence about locations, schedules, security." Lucas opened the folder but didn't look down. He met Howard's eyes. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that the same intelligence package you gave us about Tanner could have been very valuable to Haley. And I'm wondering if maybe some of that intel went to more than just the FBI. Are you accusing me of something, Agent Howard?" "I'm asking a question. Because if you traded intelligence to a criminal organization, even to protect your family, that's a serious crime. And I need to know if my star witness in the Tanner case has a credibility problem." Lucas had anticipated this conversation. He'd prepared for it. "You're right," Lucas said quietly. "Some of the intelligence about Tanner's organization did reach Haley." Howard's face hardened. "Jesus Christ, Lucas." "But not from me. From Jamie." Lucas pulled out his own folder, one he'd carefully prepared over the past weeks. "My sister-in-law was desperately trying to save herself. She knew details about Tanner's operation from Luther. When she was released on bail, she was terrified. Luther was cooperating, but Merle wasn't. Tanner's people were still out there. She thought if she gave information to Haley, he'd protect her from Tanner's crew. That's a hell of a claim. It's documented." Lucas opened the folder. Inside were carefully edited recordings of Jamie's police interviews, highlighting moments where she discussed Tanner's operations. "She knew more than she told you. She held some back and traded it to Haley for protection. When I found out, I confronted her. That's why she moved to Pittsburgh. I told her if she didn't get out of Philadelphia and away from all of this, I'd report her violation of her cooperation agreement." It was a lie. A carefully constructed cover story that protected Lucas while explaining Haley's intelligence windfall. The recordings were real. Jamie had provided detailed information in her interviews. Lucas had simply implied she'd held some back for her own purposes. Howard studied the documents, his jaw working. If this is true, Jamie violated her plea agreement. She could go to prison. She was scared. She made bad decisions out of fear. Lucas met Howard's eyes. "But she's out of the game now. She's in Pittsburgh, doing her community service, staying clean. Putting her in prison doesn't serve justice. It just destroys what's left of her life and devastates my wife. This isn't about your wife. This is about maintaining the integrity of federal investigations. With all due respect, Agent Howard, Haley expanding into Tanner's territory doesn't affect your case. You have Tanner, Luther, Merle, and a dozen other defendants locked up. The RICO case is solid. What happens in the street-level distribution afterward isn't your jurisdiction. That's DEA and local narcotics." Howard was silent for a long moment. "You're asking me to ignore a potential compromise of the investigation. I'm suggesting that going after Jamie serves no purpose except punishing a desperate woman who made mistakes. And it might compromise the Tanner prosecution if defense attorneys argue that cooperation witnesses were trading intelligence to criminals." It was a subtle threat, and Howard recognized it. If the FBI went after Jamie, Lucas would make sure the defense knew about it. The publicity could damage the Tanner case, create appeals issues, turn a clean prosecution into a mess. Howard closed the folder. I'll need to discuss this with my superiors. But Lucas, if I find out you're covering for your own involvement, if you traded intelligence to Haley yourself, this conversation won't protect you. Understood. I'm just trying to protect my family from the fallout of Jamie's mistakes. After Lucas left, he sat in his car for a long time, hands shaking slightly from the adrenaline. Howard had bought the cover story, at least for now. But it was a reminder that the web Lucas had woven was complex, with multiple people who could expose pieces of the truth. Jamie was the weakest link. If the FBI questioned her directly about intelligence sharing with Haley, she might contradict Lucas's story simply because she didn't know she was supposed to corroborate it. Lucas made a decision. He called Jamie's number. She answered on the third ring. Lucas? What's wrong? We need to talk about your cooperation agreement and what you told various people about Tanner's organization. I don't understand. Just listen. The FBI knows that Haley got intelligence about Tanner. They're asking questions about where it came from. If they contact you, you tell them that you held back some information from your initial cooperation because you were scared of Tanner's people retaliating. You traded that information to Haley in exchange for protection. Then I found out and made you move to Pittsburgh. There was a long silence. But I didn't. I know you didn't. But this is the story that keeps both of us out of prison. You violated your cooperation agreement by holding back information. That's a problem, but it's a smaller problem than me trading intelligence to criminals. If you stick to this story, they'll probably just add conditions to your probation. If you contradict it, we both go down. Lucas, I can't lie to the FBI. You already lied to them. You lied when you said you told them everything. Now I'm just asking you to be consistent about which lies you told. His voice softened. Jamie, I protected you in all of this. I could have let you go to prison. Instead, I made sure you got probation. But that protection only works if we're aligned. Do you understand? Another long silence. Then, quietly, yes. I understand. Good. Practice the story. Make sure you can tell it convincingly. And, Jamie, stay in Pittsburgh. Don't come back to Philadelphia. Ever. After he hung up, Lucas sat with the weight of what he'd become. He'd started this operation to protect his family from criminals who'd violated their home. Now, he was manipulating witnesses, coordinating false statements, threatening his own sister-in-law. But his family was safe. That was what mattered. That evening, Lucas took Vivian and Hannah out to dinner at their favorite Italian restaurant. Hannah was excited about college preparation, talking about dorm preferences and freshman seminars. Vivian laughed at her daughter's enthusiasm, looking more relaxed than she had in months. Lucas watched them both, committing this moment to memory. This was why he'd done everything. The planning, the manipulation, the carefully orchestrated destruction of criminal organizations, the deals with devils like Haley. All of it was for this, for his wife's smile, his daughter's future, the safety of the life they'd built together. After dinner, as they walked to the car, Hannah hugged Lucas tightly. Thanks, Dad, for everything. I know this whole thing with Aunt Jamie was hard, but you handled it. You kept us safe. Lucas hugged her back, feeling the fierce protectiveness that had driven every decision. That's my job, kiddo. Keeping you safe. What Hannah didn't know, what Lucas would never tell her, was exactly what keeping her safe had required. The surveillance, the manipulation, the strategic destruction of human lives, the alliances with criminals. Sometimes being a good father meant doing terrible things. As they drove home through the quiet streets of Riverside, Lucas thought about the intelligence package sitting on his secure server, the dead man's switch protecting his family, the complex web of lies and leverage he'd constructed. He'd won, but the victory had cost him something essential. The belief that he was fundamentally a good person making righteous choices. Now he knew the truth. He was a man who'd learned how to win in war zones, and when his family was threatened, he'd simply applied those lessons at home. The civilians around him, Vivian, Hannah, even Jamie, they lived in a world of laws and ethics and moral boundaries. Lucas had learned to live in the shadows between those boundaries, where survival mattered more than righteousness. And he'd do it all again without hesitation, because at the end of the day, his family was safe. And that was the only victory that truly mattered. Chapter 9. Resolution and New Beginnings. 6 months after Daryl Tanner's arrest, Lucas stood in a federal courthouse watching the final act of a drama he'd orchestrated from the shadows. Tanner sat at the defense table, his expensive suit unable to hide the way prison had hollowed him out. The jury had deliberated for just 4 hours before returning with guilty verdicts on all counts: RICO conspiracy, drug trafficking, witness intimidation, money laundering. The judge's sentencing was swift and severe: 35 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. As marshals led Tanner away, he looked across the courtroom directly at Lucas. There was no anger in his eyes anymore, just a kind of exhausted recognition. He knew who'd destroyed him, even if he could never prove it. Lucas held his gaze until Tanner was gone. Agent Howard met Lucas outside the courthouse. That's the end of it. Tanner's organization is completely dismantled. 12 major defendants convicted, 37 total arrests, and we've disrupted about $60 million in annual drug distribution. Good work, Lucas said. We couldn't have done it without your intelligence and cooperation. Howard paused. I never followed up about that Jamie situation. My superiors decided that pursuing potential violations of cooperation agreements would compromise more important prosecutions. So that matter's closed. Lucas nodded, relieved but not surprised. The FBI had bigger concerns than a scared woman who might have held back information. What about Haley? Lucas asked carefully. Howard's expression darkened. Still operating. Bigger than ever, actually. But he's smart. Keeps his hands clean, uses cutouts and intermediaries. We're building a case, but it'll take time. I'm sure you'll get him eventually. Yeah. Howard studied Lucas. You know what's interesting? After Tanner went down, there was this brief window where we thought maybe the intelligence leak would help us flip someone in Haley's organization. Use them against each other. But Haley seemed to anticipate that. He locked down his operations, compartmentalized information, made himself nearly untouchable. Sounds like he learned from Tanner's mistakes. Or someone taught him. Howard's gaze was sharp. You ever think about what we discussed? Joining the Bureau? You've got the skills, the experience. Could do a lot of good. I'm happy consulting. Less politics. Howard handed Lucas a business card. My offer stands. If you ever want to use your talents for something more than corporate security, call me. The Bureau needs people who understand how to think like the enemy. After Howard left, Lucas drove to Hannah's high school to watch her final debate tournament before graduation. She was magnificent, confident, articulate, destroying her opponent's arguments with precision and evidence. She got her acceptance to Penn State with a full academic scholarship. In the fall, she'd leave for college, safe and unburdened by knowledge of what her father had done to protect her. That evening, the Turner family gathered for a celebration dinner, just the 3 of them, in the home that had been violated but was now secure again. To Hannah, Vivian raised her glass. Our brilliant daughter, heading off to amazing things. They clinked glasses. Lucas watched his wife and daughter laughing together and felt the weight of the past months settling into something like peace. Later, after Hannah went upstairs to pack for a weekend trip, Vivian and Lucas sat on the back porch with wine. Have you heard from Jamie? Vivian asked quietly. Last week. She's doing well, working at a community center in Pittsburgh, fulfilling her service hours. Staying clean. Do you think she'll ever really turn her life around? I hope so. For her sake and yours. Vivian was quiet for a moment. I know you did something, Lucas, beyond just catching them. The way everything fell apart so completely. Tanner's organization, all those arrests happening simultaneously, Haley's crew attacking at exactly the right moments. That wasn't coincidence. Lucas sipped his wine, choosing words carefully. I protected our family. That's all that matters. I'm not asking you to explain. I'm just saying, I know you, Lucas. I've been married to you for 14 years. I know you're capable of things that would terrify most people, and I'm grateful for that. For you. She took his hand, squeezing it. Whatever you did, however you did it, thank you for keeping us safe. Lucas kissed her forehead. Always. What he didn't tell her was that the protection was ongoing. The dead man switch still ran in the background of his life. Insurance against Haley or anyone else who might threaten his family. The surveillance equipment remained in place, monitoring for threats. His contacts in law enforcement and corporate security kept him informed about potential dangers. He'd learned that safety wasn't a destination. It was a constant vigilance, a permanent state of readiness. 1 week later, Lucas received an encrypted email from an address he didn't recognize. He opened it carefully, running security protocols. Inside was a single message. Impressive work on the Tanner situation. I represent people who appreciate competence and discretion. If you're interested in consulting opportunities that match your particular skills, we should talk. No obligations. Just a conversation. Contact me only if interested. Encrypted phone number. Lucas stared at the message for a long time. This was how it started. One job, one compromise, one step into a world that was hard to leave. He could ignore it, stick to corporate security, legitimate work, the normal life he'd built. Or he could acknowledge what the past 6 months had proven. He was exceptionally good at a very specific kind of work. The kind that required thinking like the enemy, operating in shadows, doing what others couldn't or wouldn't. Lucas closed the email without responding, but he didn't delete it, because part of him, the part that had spent 12 years in war zones, the part that had methodically destroyed a criminal organization to protect his family, that part understood the appeal. That night, Lucas activated his secure server and logged into the dead man's switch. Everything was nominal. The intelligence package on Haley remained secure, ready to deploy if necessary. He reviewed his security systems, his contingency plans, his emergency protocols. Everything in place, everything ready. Then he went upstairs to where Vivian was reading in bed. "Everything okay?" she asked, looking up. "Everything's fine. Just checking some work stuff." He climbed into bed beside her, pulling her close. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet. Lights in windows, families in homes, the ordinary peaceful life that most people took for granted. Lucas had learned that peace was never given. It was earned, fought for, sometimes built on compromises that would horrify the people it protected. He'd made those compromises, done those things, become someone his younger self might not recognize. But as he lay there with Vivian beside him, knowing Hannah was safe upstairs, knowing the threats were contained and his family protected, he had no regrets. Some men measured success in money or power or fame. Lucas measured it in the peaceful breathing of his wife, the sound of his daughter's music drifting down from upstairs, the security of a home that no one would dare violate again. He'd won, not through the law, not through conventional justice, but through understanding how power worked and being willing to use it without hesitation. And if that made him something other than a good man, if it made him dangerous, ruthless, someone who operated by different rules, so be it. His family was safe. That was the only truth that mattered. 3 months later, Lucas sat in his office reviewing a new corporate security contract when his encrypted phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Thanks for keeping your word about the neighborhood. Clean and quiet, just like we agreed. Professional respect. RH." Lucas smiled slightly and deleted the message. Mutual respect between adversaries. It was better than most alternative outcomes. Hannah was thriving at Penn State. Vivian had been promoted at the hospital. Jamie was completing her probation successfully in Pittsburgh. Tanner was in federal prison. Luther was in witness protection. The neighborhood remained peaceful. All threats contained. All loose ends managed. All consequences anticipated and planned for. Lucas returned to his contract review, just another security consultant helping corporations protect their assets. But in his safe at home was a folder containing intelligence on 3 different criminal organizations, evidence of corruption in multiple police departments, and detailed profiles of dangerous individuals who'd made the mistake of crossing paths with Lucas Turner. Insurance policies. Leverage. The tools of someone who'd learned that safety required eternal vigilance and a willingness to do terrible things in service of protecting what mattered. He was a husband, a father, a decorated veteran, a successful consultant, and something else, something harder to define. A guardian who protected his family not through law or ethics, but through understanding darkness well enough to fight it on its own terms. Outside his office window, the city moved through its daily rhythms. Millions of people living ordinary lives, protected by systems they trusted and laws they believed in. Lucas knew better. He knew those systems were fragile, that laws were inadequate, that real protection required strength, strategy, and the willingness to cross lines that others wouldn't. He'd cross those lines for his family, and he'd do it again tomorrow. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, The Operator. Staff Sergeant Cody Strong adjusted his scope, the crosshairs dancing over the compound 3 miles away in the Afghan mountains. 20 years of military service had carved deep lines around his steel-gray eyes, and his weathered hands moved with the precision of a surgeon. At 42, Cody was what his colleagues called a ghost, a special operations sniper who could disappear into any landscape and eliminate targets that others couldn't even find. Target acquired, he whispered into his comm, watching a high-value Taliban commander emerge from the building. Painting the target now. The laser designator hummed softly as Cody marked the building for the incoming drone strike. In 30 seconds, a Hellfire missile would reduce the compound to rubble. It was just another Tuesday in his world of calculated violence and surgical precision. Cody had joined the Army straight out of high school in small-town Montana, driven by a combination of patriotism and a desperate need to escape his alcoholic father's fists. The military had given him purpose, structure, and most importantly, the skills to become one of the most feared operators in Special Forces. He'd serve in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, and half a dozen Black Ops missions that officially never happened. His reputation was built on 2 things: his supernatural accuracy with a rifle and his absolute unwillingness to forgive betrayal. When a teammate had once leaked their position to insurgents for money, Cody had personally hunted the man down during leave and left him paralyzed in a Detroit alley. The incident was never reported, never investigated. Some betrayals, Cody believed, deserved permanent consequences. 3 years ago, he'd married Roseanne Brewer, a nurse he'd met during his recovery from shrapnel wounds. She was beautiful, compassionate, and claimed to understand the demands of military life. More importantly, she'd accepted his 8-year-old son Dino from his first marriage, a marriage that had ended when his ex-wife died in a car accident. Roseanne had brought her own baggage, a 6-year-old daughter named Emma from a previous relationship. Cody had embraced the role of stepfather, thinking he was building the family he'd never had growing up. For 3 years, their home in Fayetteville had been his sanctuary between deployments. Missile impact in 10 seconds. Came the voice through his earpiece. Cody watched through his scope as the building disappeared in a ball of orange flame. Another successful mission. In 48 hours, he'd be rotating home for a month of leave. Time he planned to spend teaching Dino to hunt and maybe taking Roseanne on that delayed honeymoon to the mountains. The satellite phone in his pack buzzed. Strange. Only family emergencies came through that line during active operations. Strong here, he answered, expecting to hear his commanding officer's voice. Instead, a woman's voice crackled through the static. Sergeant Strong? This is Linda Hawkins from North Carolina Child Protective Services. Sir, your son Dino is in our care. Cody's blood turned to ice. Through the scope, he could see secondary explosions from the destroyed compound, but suddenly the war seemed very far away. What happened? His voice remained steady, but his finger had unconsciously moved to his rifle's trigger. Sir, his stepfather used a cigarette lighter on him. He's severely injured and being treated at Cape Fear Valley Medical Center. The burns are extensive. The world tilted. Stepfather? Cody was Dino's father. The only stepfather in the picture was... In the background of the call, he heard a child's sobbing voice. His son's voice, broken and terrified. He burned his initials into my arm. He said I was his property now. The words hit Cody like a sniper's bullet to the chest. His son, His boy, who collected baseball cards and dreamed of becoming a Marine like his dad, had been branded like cattle by some piece of shit who was apparently living in his house. Who did this? Cody's voice dropped to a whisper that his unit knew meant someone was about to die. A man named Quentin Krause. He's been arrested, but... Cody ended the call. His commanding officer, Major Cornelius Clayton, materialized beside him with that uncanny ability that made him an excellent field commander. We'll finish this mission strong. Go home and teach that fool a lesson he'll never forget. Clayton had served with Cody for 8 years. He'd seen what happened to people who crossed his best sniper. The major's cold smile suggested he wouldn't be filing any reports about what might happen to Mr. Quentin Krause. As Cody packed his gear with mechanical precision, his mind was already shifting into hunter mode. Someone had hurt his son and was apparently sleeping in his bed with his wife. The war in Afghanistan was about to become secondary to a much more personal conflict. He'd built his reputation on never forgetting and never forgiving betrayal. Now he was about to remind everyone why that reputation was well-earned. Chapter 2. The Betrayal Revealed. 18 hours later, Cody's boots hit the tarmac at Pope Army Airfield. He'd caught the first military transport out of Bagram, sleeping fitfully during the long flight while images of his son's terrified voice played on repeat in his mind. The October air in North Carolina felt alien after months in the desert, but what truly disoriented him was the civilian clothes in his duffel bag, clothes he'd need to blend in while he gathered intelligence on exactly what had happened to his family. Cape Fear Valley Medical Center loomed before him like a fortress. Cody had infiltrated terrorist compounds with less anxiety than he felt walking through those sterile hallways. A friendly nurse directed him to the pediatric burn unit, where he found his son sleeping in a bed that made the tough 8-year-old look impossibly small. Dino's left arm was wrapped in bandages, but Cody could see the edges of burned flesh where someone had deliberately pressed hot metal against his child's skin. The letters QK were branded into the boy's forearm like a rancher's mark on livestock. "Daddy." Dino's eyes fluttered open, and Cody saw a wariness there that hadn't existed before. The look of prey that had learned predators could strike without warning. "I'm here, buddy." Cody sat carefully on the edge of the bed, his voice gentle despite the volcanic rage building behind his ribs. "Tell me what happened." The story came out in halting whispers. 3 months ago, Mom had started bringing Uncle Quinn around more often. Quinn Krause was a construction foreman, big and loud, who'd moved into their house 2 weeks ago. He'd started hitting Mom when she talked back, then graduated to backhanding Dino when the boy tried to protect her. "He said you weren't coming back," Dino whispered. "He said he was my dad now, and I had to do what he said. When I told him you were my real dad, he got really mad. He heated up his lighter with the stove, and Cody gently squeezed his son's uninjured hand. "Where's Emma?" "She's with Grandma Brewer. Quinn never hurt her, just me and Mom." Dino's eyes filled with tears. "Is Mom okay?" She tried to stop him, but he hit her really hard. 20 minutes later, Cody sat in his truck outside the hospital, staring at his phone. 3 missed calls from Roseanne, 2 voicemails he hadn't listened to yet. His hands, steady enough to make 1,000-yard shots in combat, trembled slightly as he played the first message. "Cody, baby, I know how this looks, but I can explain everything. Quinn was just helping around the house while you were gone, and things got complicated. I never meant for any of this to happen. Please call me back." The second voicemail was different, desperate, pleading. "The police released Quinn on bail. He's talking about leaving town, but he wants to see me first. I'm scared, Cody. I know I messed up, but I need you. We need you." Cody deleted both messages without a trace of emotion. His wife, his partner, the woman he'd trusted with his son's safety, had brought a predator into their home. Worse, she was still in contact with the man who'd branded his child like property. The drive to his house took 15 minutes through neighborhoods that had once felt like home. Now every familiar street corner looked like a potential ambush site. Every parked car a possible threat. His house, a modest 2-story colonial with a lawn he'd spent weekends manicuring, sat at the end of Magnolia Drive like a crime scene waiting to be processed. Cody sat in his truck, studying the house through a sniper's eyes. Roseanne's Honda was in the driveway, but there was also a lifted red Ford F-250 with construction company logos and a thin blue line bumper sticker. Quinn was still here, moving with the silent precision that had kept him alive through hundreds of combat missions. Cody approached the house from the side yard. Through the kitchen window, he could see them, his wife and the man who'd tortured his son, sitting at the dinner table like a normal couple. Roseanne looked smaller than he remembered, her auburn hair pulled back in a ponytail that showed fresh bruises on her neck. She was crying, gesturing frantically while speaking in hushed tones. Quentin Krause was everything Cody had expected, a thick-necked bully with prison tattoos covering his forearms and dead eyes that suggested violence was his first language. "Told you the little shit would cause problems," Quinn was saying, his voice carrying through the thin window. "Should have just sent him to foster care when this started. He's just a boy, Quinn. He didn't deserve." The sound of Quinn's palm striking Roseanne's cheek was sharp as a gunshot. "Don't tell me what he deserved. I'm trying to make a family here, and that kid was disrespecting me in my own house." Cody's vision went red around the edges. His own house. The man was calling it his own house. "The soldier boy ain't coming back," Quinn continued, reaching across the table to grab Roseanne's wrist. "His kid understands who's in charge now. Question is, do you?" Cody had heard enough. He'd conducted surveillance on terror cells with less emotional control than he was maintaining now. Every instinct screamed for immediate action, to kick down the door and demonstrate exactly what 20 years of special operations training could do to a civilian wife beater. But Cody was a professional. He'd learned patience hunting men across 3 continents. This required planning, preparation, and most importantly, ensuring that when justice came, it would be permanent and untraceable. As he slipped back to his truck, one thought crystallized with the clarity of a perfect headshot. Quentin Krause had branded his son and was apparently planning to disappear with his wife. Neither of those things was going to happen. The war had followed him home, but this time, the enemy had made the fatal mistake of bringing it to his family first. Chapter 3. The Hunter's Preparation. Cody checked into a motel 20 minutes from his house, paying cash and registering under a false name he'd used in Syria. The room was Spartan, exactly how he preferred his operational base. He spread his son's medical records, police reports, and printed screenshots from Quinn's social media across the small table, studying his enemy with the same intensity he'd once reserved for high-value targets. Quentin Krause, age 35, had a history that painted him as exactly the kind of predator who hunted vulnerable women. 2 prior domestic violence arrests. Both charges dropped when the victims mysteriously changed their testimony. A dishonorable discharge from the Marines after 3 years of mediocre service. He'd been working construction in Fayetteville for 8 months. Exactly 2 months before he'd started helping around Cody's house. The most interesting detail came from Quinn's Instagram account, which he'd kept active even after his arrest. Posted 6 hours ago. Time to start fresh somewhere new. Some people don't appreciate what they have. The geolocation tag showed he was posting from Cody's kitchen. Cody's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Heard you were back in town. Coffee tomorrow?" R. He studied the message for 30 seconds before responding. Denny's on Bragg Boulevard. 8 a.m. While most betrayed husbands might have felt pain or confusion, Cody felt only the cold clarity that came with target acquisition. Rosen wasn't his wife anymore. She was a hostile asset who'd allowed enemy infiltration of his home base. The question wasn't whether she deserved forgiveness, but whether she'd be useful for intelligence gathering before final disposition. At midnight, Cody drove past his house again. Quinn's truck was gone, but Roseanne's car remained. Through disciplined observation, he established a pattern. Quinn left around 11 p.m. and returned by 7 a.m., probably staying at another location to avoid violating his bail conditions. Smart enough to avoid the obvious trap, but not smart enough to realize he was already being hunted. Cody spent the pre-dawn hours at a 24-hour gun range outside town, burning through 3 boxes of ammunition to keep his skills sharp. The familiar weight of his customized .308 rifle felt more comforting than any conversation he'd had since returning home. Each shot grouped tighter than a quarter at 100 yards, muscle memory from thousands of hours of practice. The plan forming in his mind was elegant in its simplicity. Quinn wanted to disappear with Roseanne. He'd disappear, all right, just not in the way he was expecting. At 8 a.m., Cody sat in a corner booth at Denny's, positioned to watch all entrances while keeping his back to a wall. Old habits. Roseanne arrived 10 minutes late, looking like she'd slept in her car. The confident nurse he'd married had been replaced by a hollow-eyed woman who jumped at shadows. "Thank God you're here," she whispered, sliding into the booth opposite him. "I was so afraid you wouldn't come." Cody studied her with the detached interest of a professional interrogator. 3 years of marriage had taught him her tells. The way she touched her neck when lying, how her voice pitched higher under stress. Right now, every tell was firing simultaneously. "Where's Quinn?" he asked quietly. He's staying with a friend until things calm down." "Cody, I need you to know that I never wanted any of this to happen. When you deployed, I was so lonely, and he was just helping with repairs around the house. I didn't know he had a temper until it was too late." The story was plausible, delivered with enough tears to convince most men. But Cody had interrogated Taliban commanders who were better liars. "How long?" he asked. "How long what? How long have you been sleeping with him?" Roseanne's face crumpled. 6 months. But it didn't mean anything, Cody. I was scared and alone, and he made me feel protected. 6 months. That minute had started during his previous deployment, long before Quinn had moved into their house. The timeline painted a different picture than her story of innocent repairs that got complicated. "He branded my son," Cody said, his voice perfectly level. Heated up a lighter and burned his initials into Dino's arm. "I tried to stop him. I swear I tried, but he's so much stronger than me." He said Dino needed to learn respect, and when I argued, he hit me too. "Look," she pulled down her collar, showing finger-shaped bruises around her throat. Cody felt nothing looking at the marks. A year ago, they would have triggered his protective instincts. Now, they were just evidence that Quinn preferred hands-on violence, useful intelligence for their inevitable confrontation. "Where's he really staying?" Cody asked. "I don't know. He has a friend named Freeman Mora who works construction with him. Maybe there." Another piece of the puzzle. Cody made a mental note to look up Freeman Mora. "He want me to leave with him," Roseanne continued. "Says we can start over somewhere fresh, maybe Tennessee or Georgia. He's talking about leaving this weekend. And you want to go?" The question hung between them like a loaded weapon. Roseanne's answer would determine whether she was a victim who'd made mistakes or an active collaborator in the destruction of his family. "I don't know what I want anymore," she whispered. "I know I hurt you, and I know I failed Dino. But I'm afraid of what Quinn will do if I try to leave him. He's not stable, Cody. He talks about killing people who cross him." Cody almost smiled at the irony. Quinn Krause had no idea what real killing looked like. "I'm going to fix this," he told her, dropping a 20 on the table. "You're going to go home and act normal. Don't tell Quinn we met. Don't change your routine." "Can you do that?" Roseanne nodded eagerly, hope flickering in her eyes. "You're going to save us." Cody stood up, looking down at the woman who'd once been his wife. "I'm going to save my son. What happens to you depends on your choices in the next few days." As he walked away, Cody was already calculating distances, timelines, and disposal methods. Quinn Krause wanted to start fresh somewhere new. He was about to get exactly what he'd asked for. Chapter 4. Intelligence Gathering. By noon, Cody had transformed his motel room into a tactical operations center. A detailed map of Fayetteville covered one wall, marked with Quinn's known locations, his workplace, and the addresses of his known associates. Cody's military-issue laptop hummed quietly as it ran facial recognition software against security camera footage he'd obtained through contacts in base security. Freeman Mora's address had been easy to find through public records. A quick drive past the rundown duplex on the south side of town confirmed Quinn's red F-250 parked in the driveway. Cody noted the lack of security cameras, the isolated location, and the fact that Mora's neighbors were either drug addicts or working multiple jobs. Perfect for an operation requiring discretion. His phone buzzed with a text from Major Clayton. "Package delivered to usual location." No questions asked. The package was waiting in a storage unit Cody maintained off-base, military-grade surveillance equipment, untraceable weapons, and other tools of his trade that weren't exactly standard issue. 20 years of special operations had taught him that sometimes the mission required resources that couldn't be requisitioned through official channels. By 3 p.m., Cody had established observation posts around both Mora's duplex and the construction site where Quinn worked. Digital cameras with telephoto lenses gave him real-time surveillance of his targets, while a frequency scanner monitored local police communications. Quinn's pattern was becoming clear. Work until 5 p.m., stop at Murphy's bar for 3 beers, then to Mora's place until late evening. At 6 p.m., Cody was positioned across the street from Murphy's bar when Quinn emerged, visibly drunk and stumbling toward his truck. Most people would have called the police about the obvious DUI in progress. Cody simply followed at a distance, noting that Quinn drove like the entitled asshole he was, speeding, weaving, running stop signs. Quinn's first stop was unexpected, the elementary school where both Dino and Emma attended classes. He sat in his truck in the parking lot for 20 minutes, engine running, staring at the playground where children played after-school programs. Cody felt his finger tighten on the encrypted radio that could summon Clayton and a full tactical team in under 10 minutes. But Quinn eventually drove away without incident, probably too drunk to realize school was still in session. The stop revealed something important, though. He was thinking about the kids, which meant he might try to grab them before his planned disappearance. That possibility died tonight. Quinn's next stop was more predictable, a liquor store where he bought a bottle of Jack Daniels and a carton of cigarettes. Cody noted the store's security cameras and made a mental note to ensure his face never appeared on them. By 8 p.m., Quinn was back at Mora's duplex, but he wasn't alone. Through his telephoto lens, Cody watched as 3 other men joined Quinn and Freeman in the backyard. The gathering had the feel of a planning session. Quinn gesturing emphatically while the others listened, occasional glances toward a map spread across a picnic table. Cody adjusted his parabolic microphone and caught fragments of conversation. Friday night, clean out the account. Across state lines by Saturday. A robbery. They were planning to rob something Friday night and use the money to fund their fresh start. The question was what they intended to hit, and whether Roseanne was part of the plan or just a convenient hostage. At 10 p.m., the meeting broke up. 2 of the men left in a beat-up Chevy, while the third, a tall, nervous-looking guy with a facial tattoo, remained behind with Quinn and Freeman. Cody photographed all of them, then settled in for a long night of surveillance. Around midnight, his patience was rewarded. Quinn emerged from the duplex, carrying a large duffel bag, which he loaded into his truck. When he drove away, Cody faced a choice: follow Quinn or investigate what he'd left behind. The duplex won. 15 minutes after Quinn left, Cody was inside Freeman Mora's home through a back window that had been left open. 20 years of breaking into terrorist safe houses had taught him how to move through civilian spaces without leaving traces. The place was a shrine to failure. Unpaid bills stacked on a table, empty beer cans covering every surface, and the overwhelming smell of cigarettes and desperation. But it was the bedroom that provided real intelligence. Spread across Freeman's bed were detailed floor plans of the First National Bank on Hay Street, guard schedules, and photographs of the armored car service that made Monday morning pickups. Quinn's crew was planning to hit the bank's weekend deposits before the Monday pickup, potentially hundreds of thousands in cash. More interesting was what Cody found in the closet. Tactical gear that looked suspiciously like surplus military equipment, including body armor and weapons that were definitely not legal for civilian ownership. Someone in Quinn's crew had connections to serious criminal networks. A notebook on the nightstand contained the real prize. RB says she can get us the alarm codes from her hospital shift supervisor. Bank manager's wife works there. RB, Roseanne Brewer. His wife wasn't just a victim who'd made bad choices. She was an active participant in planning the robbery that would fund her new life with Quinn Krause. Cody photographed everything, then slipped back out the window. As he drove back to his motel, he felt the cold satisfaction that came with target confirmation. Both Quinn and Roseanne had just upgraded from personal problems to enemy combatants. The bank robbery was scheduled for Friday night. That gave him 3 days to prepare his own operation. Quinn wanted to disappear with stolen money and a married woman. He was about to get half of what he'd asked for. Chapter 5. The Trap is Set. Thursday morning brought unseasonably cold weather to Fayetteville, along with news that made Cody's blood run ice cold. The hospital called to inform him that Dino had developed an infection in his burn wounds and would need to stay another week for treatment. Someone had been asking questions about the boy's discharge date. Cody arrived at the hospital to find 2 security guards posted outside his son's room, a precaution he'd arranged through military channels after discovering Quinn's school surveillance. But the guards were new faces, men he didn't recognize. "Where are Roberts and Martinez?" he asked the charge nurse. "They called in sick this morning." These are replacement guards from a private company. The replacement guards had the look of men who'd learned violence in prison rather than military service. When Cody asked to see their credentials, both men tensed in ways that confirmed his suspicions. "You need to leave," the larger guard said, his hand moving towards something concealed under his jacket. "Hospital security only." Cody smiled, the cold expression that had been the last thing many enemies had seen. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." The hallway cleared quickly as Cody demonstrated exactly why Special Forces operators were trained in close-quarters combat. Neither fake guard had time to reach their weapons before finding themselves unconscious on the linoleum floor. The encounter lasted less than 30 seconds and was captured by security cameras that mysteriously malfunctioned immediately afterward. Hospital security arrived to find the 2 men zip-tied to chairs with identification cards that revealed them as associates of Freeman Mora. Quinn had sent men to grab Dino, probably as leverage for the bank job or insurance for his escape. "We need to move you," Cody told his son, while legitimate guard from the base were summoned. "How do you feel about spending a few days with Uncle Clayton?" Dino, despite everything he'd endured, managed a weak smile. "Does Uncle Clayton still have that cool motorcycle?" Within 2 hours, Dino was safely hidden at Clayton's off-base residence under the protection of 2 Delta Force operators on vacation. Quinn's attempt to grab the boy had failed, but more importantly, it had revealed the timeline for his larger plan. The bank job was happening tonight, not Friday. Cody spent Thursday afternoon conducting final reconnaissance of the First National Bank. The building was a standard commercial structure with predictable security, cameras, motion sensors, and a silent alarm connected directly to Fayetteville PD. The armored car pickup happened Monday mornings at 9 a.m., which meant weekend deposits would be sitting in the main vault for maximum payoff. Quinn's plan was actually well conceived. Hit the bank during the minimal security window between Saturday evening and Monday morning, grab the weekend deposits, and disappear before anyone realized the money was gone. If Roseanne was providing inside information about alarm codes, they might actually pull it off, which was exactly what Cody was counting on. At 6 p.m., he positioned himself in an abandoned building across from the bank with a clear view of all approaches. His gear included night vision, encrypted communications, and enough firepower to stop a small army. More importantly, he had something Quinn's crew lacked: professional training and absolute commitment to his mission. Roseanne's Honda pulled up at 7:30 p.m., confirming her active participation. She sat in the car for 10 minutes, probably gathering courage, before walking to the bank's employee entrance. Her key card still worked. She'd obviously been planning this for weeks. Quinn's truck arrived 15 minutes later, followed by Freeman's Chevy with 2 additional crew members. All 4 men were heavily armed and wearing ski masks that wouldn't fool security cameras for long. They were amateurs playing at being professionals. Cody watched through his scope as Roseanne disabled the alarm system from inside, then opened the rear door for Quinn's team. The robbery was textbook, fast, efficient, and completely predictable. What they didn't expect was the SWAT team that surrounded the building 5 minutes after they entered. Cody had called in an anonymous tip about suspicious activity, timing it perfectly to trap Quinn's crew inside with the stolen money. Through his scope, he watched chaos erupt as heavily armed police surrounded every exit. Quinn appeared at the front window, Roseanne held at gunpoint as he screamed demands that no one could hear clearly. The standoff was exactly what Cody had orchestrated, public, documented, and guaranteed to end with Quinn in federal prison for bank robbery and hostage-taking. But Cody wasn't finished. Using skills learned in urban warfare, he infiltrated the police perimeter through storm drains that connected to the bank's basement. While SWAT negotiators kept Quinn distracted at the front of the building, Cody entered through the foundation access and made his way to the vault level. He found Freeman Mora standing guard over 2 bags of stolen cash, nervous and sweating despite the cool evening air. The man never saw Cody coming. "Freeman," Cody whispered from the shadows. When Freeman spun around, gun raised, Cody was already moving. 20 years of close-quarters combat training compressed into 3 seconds of violence that left Freeman unconscious and zip-tied next to the stolen money. The other 2 crew members met similar fates as Cody methodically worked his way through the building. By the time he reached the main floor, Quinn was alone with Roseanne and completely unaware that his backup had been neutralized. Through the bank's security monitors, Cody could see Quinn pressed against the front windows, using Roseanne as a human shield while SWAT snipers found their angles. The man was trapped, desperate, and about to make the kind of mistake that would justify what came next. Cody keyed his radio to the police frequency and spoke in the calm voice of someone providing tactical intelligence. "Subject has female hostage at front window. Recommend maintaining containment while secondary team enters through basement access." What he didn't mention was that the secondary team was already inside and had very different orders than arrest and detention. The trap was set. Now came the justice. Chapter 6, The Reckoning Begins. Inside the bank, Quinn Krause was learning the difference between planning a crime and executing one under pressure. SWAT's floodlights turned the front windows into a fishbowl, while their negotiator's voice echoed through a bullhorn with offers that sounded more like threats. "This is your last chance, Mr. Krause. Release the hostage and surrender, or we're coming in." Quinn pressed the gun harder against Roseanne's temple, his hand shaking with a combination of adrenaline and alcohol withdrawal. "I want a helicopter and safe passage. You got 1 hour or the bitch dies." He'd watched too many movies, made too many assumptions about how hostage negotiations worked. What he hadn't accounted for was that his hostage was the wife of a man who'd spent 20 years killing people who threatened his family. Cody emerged from the shadows behind Quinn like a predator who'd been waiting for the perfect moment to strike. His movement was silent, controlled, and absolutely lethal in its intent. "Hello, Quinn." The voice made Quinn spin around, dragging Roseanne with him. He found himself face to face with a man who looked like death personified, calm, focused, and completely unimpressed by the gun pointed in his direction. "You're supposed to be in Afghanistan," Quinn stammered. "I was painting a target for a drone strike when a call came in," Cody said conversationally. "It was a Child Protective Services agent. She told me someone had branded my son like cattle." Quinn's gun wavered between Cody and Roseanne, his tactical position suddenly much more complicated. Outside, SWAT was closing in. Behind him stood a man who'd made a career of killing people in their sleep. "Stay back. I'll kill her." Cody tilted his head slightly, considering the threat with professional interest. "Will you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you need her alive. Dead hostages don't buy you passage out of federal prison." The psychological pressure was deliberate. Cody had interrogated terrorists who'd cracked under less focused attention. Quinn was just a small-town bully who'd never faced someone who understood violence as a craft rather than an impulse. Besides, Cody continued, taking a step closer, "She's not really my wife anymore. Hard to be married to someone who's planning bank robberies with a man who tortured your stepson." Roseanne's eyes widened in shock. "Cody, I can explain. You got inside information about the alarm codes from someone at the hospital," Cody interrupted. "You provided the timing for when security would be minimal. You've been planning this for weeks, haven't you?" The admission was written across her face before she could deny it. Quinn's insurance policy had just become worthless. "So here's what's going to happen," Cody said, close enough now that Quinn would have to choose between shooting him or Roseanne, but not both. "You're going to put the gun down, and we're going to have a conversation about boundaries." "Fuck you." Quinn swung the weapon toward Cody, but his movements were those of an amateur, telegraphed, emotional, and fatally slow. Cody's response was the product of 2 decades of training and combat experience. His hand closed around Quinn's wrist like a steel trap, applying pressure to nerve points that made the man's fingers go numb. The gun clattered to the floor as Quinn screamed in pain. Roseanne tried to run, but Cody's other hand caught her wrist with casual efficiency. She wasn't going anywhere until this conversation was finished. 20 years, Cody said quietly, maintaining his grip on both of them. 20 years I've been killing people who threaten innocent families. You know what the difference is between you and them? Quinn was gasping for air, his wrist bent at an angle that suggested permanent damage was imminent. What? They were fighting for something they believed in. You're just a coward who beats children. The sound of Quinn's wrist breaking was sharp as a gunshot. His scream echoed through the bank, audible even over the police bullhorns outside. Roseanne tried to pull away, but Cody's grip was unbreakable. My son is 8 years old, Cody continued conversationally. He collects baseball cards and wants to be a Marine when he grows up. You burned your initials into his arm and told him he was your property. Quinn was sobbing now, cradling his shattered wrist. I was drunk. I didn't mean. You heated up a lighter with the stove, Cody interrupted. That's premeditation. That's deliberate torture of child. Through the bank's windows, SWAT was preparing for entry. Cody could see laser sights painting the walls, hear the tactical teams coordinating their breach. He had maybe 3 minutes before this became significantly more complicated. Here's what's going to happen to you, Quinn. You get a federal prison for bank robbery. If you're lucky, you'll get protective custody. If you're not, Cody leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. I have friends in every major prison system, men who don't approve of people who hurt children. The implications were clear enough that even Quinn's alcohol-damaged brain could process them. Federal prison was where he was going. What happened to child abusers in federal prison was legendary. But Cody wasn't finished. As for you, he said, turning to Roseanne, you're going to prison too. Conspiracy to commit bank robbery, providing material support to criminal activity. Your daughter Emma is going to grow up knowing her mother chose a child abuser over her family. Roseanne's face crumpled. Please, Cody. I made mistakes, but I love you. We can fix this. No, Cody said simply. We can't. The SWAT breach came precisely when he expected it. Explosive charges on the rear door, followed by tactical teams flowing through the building like water. Cody released both his prisoners and stepped back, hands visible and empty. Federal agent, he called out, displaying credentials that would pass casual inspection. Suspect secured. The team leader, a veteran who recognized professional competence, not an acknowledgement. Casualties, one suspect with a broken wrist. Self-inflicted during attempted assault on a federal officer. Quinn was screaming about his rights and demanding medical attention while Roseanne sobbed uncontrollably. Both were zip-tied and led away as evidence teams cataloged the stolen money and weapons. As far as the official record would show, Quinn Krause had injured himself during the failed bank robbery, and Roseanne Brewer had been an unfortunate hostage who turned out to be a co-conspirator. The mysterious federal agent who'd infiltrated the building during negotiations would vanish into bureaucratic paperwork that led nowhere. But Cody's work wasn't finished. Quinn and Roseanne were going to prison, but justice required something more permanent than the federal correctional system could provide. The real reckoning was just beginning. Chapter 7, Federal Justice. 6 months later, the federal courthouse in Raleigh buzzed with activity as Quinn Krause and Roseanne Brewer faced sentencing for their roles in the first national bank robbery. The local media had covered the case extensively, a domestic violence perpetrator and his lover attempting to fund their escape with stolen money made for compelling headlines. Cody sat in the gallery wearing his dress blues, every ribbon and decoration earned through 2 decades of service. To the casual observer, he was simply a concerned father attending his ex-wife's sentencing. Only a few people in the courtroom knew that he'd orchestrated every element of the case that had brought them here. Quinn, wearing an orange jumpsuit and sporting a permanently twisted left wrist, looked like a broken man. 6 months in federal custody awaiting trial had not been kind to him. Word had spread quickly through the prison population that he was a child abuser, and even in protective custody, accidents happened. His face bore fresh bruises that the guards claimed to know nothing about. "Mr. Krause," Judge Mercedes Schwartz said, her voice cutting through the courtroom's murmur, "you have pled guilty to armed bank robbery, assault with a deadly weapon, and child abuse. The prosecution has recommended 25 years in federal prison without possibility of parole." Quinn's court-appointed attorney tried to argue for leniency, citing his client's troubled childhood and substance abuse issues. The judge listened with the patience required by law, but her expression suggested she'd heard it all before. Cody had made sure certain facts reached the prosecution team through unofficial channels. Quinn's previous domestic violence arrests, witness statements from neighbors who'd heard Dino screaming, and medical records that showed the burn pattern was consistent with deliberate torture rather than accidental injury. "Mrs. Brewer," the judge continued, turning to Roseanne, "your role in this crime is particularly troubling. You provided inside information to plan the robbery, and you did so while failing to protect an 8-year-old child from documented abuse." Roseanne's attorney, a more competent defender than Quinn could afford, had negotiated a plea deal, 15 years in federal prison in exchange for testifying against her co-conspirators. She tried to portray herself as another victim, manipulated by Quinn's violence and threats. The strategy might have worked if not for the evidence Cody had anonymously provided. Bank records showing Roseanne had opened secret accounts to hide money. Hotel receipts proving the affair had started long before Quinn moved into their house. Most damning, recorded phone calls from jail where she discussed escape plans with Quinn. "I loved him," Roseanne had sobbed during her testimony. "I know it was wrong, but I was afraid of what he'd do if I left him." The prosecution had methodically destroyed that narrative. If she'd been afraid for her safety, why had she provided alarm codes for the bank robbery? If she'd been concerned about the children, why had she never reported the abuse to authorities? Both defendants will serve their sentences in federal facilities, Judge Schwartz announced. Mr. Krause will be transferred to ADX Florence in Colorado. Mrs. Brewer will serve her time at FCI Dublin in California. ADX Florence, Supermax, the facility where they sent terrorists, organized crime leaders, and the most dangerous criminals in federal custody. Quinn would spend 23 hours a day in an 8x12 concrete cell, with 1 hour of exercise in a larger concrete box. No contact with other inmates, no television, no books except religious texts. It was a death sentence that would take 25 years to complete. Roseanne's destination was less severe, but equally permanent. FCI Dublin housed white-collar criminals and non-violent offenders, but word would reach the other inmates about why she was there. Women who'd lost their own children to abuse and neglect didn't typically welcome child enablers with open arms. As the courtroom emptied, Cody approached the prosecutor, a sharp woman named Elisa Dudley who'd handled the case with impressive thoroughness. "Thank you," he said simply. "Thank the evidence," she replied. This case had more documentation than most terrorism prosecutions. Someone did very thorough investigative work. Cody nodded. Someone indeed. Outside the courthouse, he found Dino waiting by their truck. The boy had grown 3 inches in 6 months and was learning to use his left arm normally again despite the scarring. The burns had healed, but they'd left permanent marks, a reminder that some wounds never completely disappeared. "Is it over?" Dino asked. "The legal part is over," Cody said. "Quinn's going to prison for the rest of his life. He'll never hurt anyone again." "What about Mom?" That was the hardest question. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that his stepmother had chosen a criminal over his safety? That she'd helped plan a bank robbery while letting him get tortured? "Your mom made some very bad choices," Cody said carefully. "She's going to prison too, but for a shorter time. When you're older, if you want to see her, we can talk about it." Dino considered this with the seriousness that trauma had forced on him too early. "I don't think I want to see her. She knew he was hurting me, and she didn't stop him." The boy's insight was painful but accurate. Roseanne had chosen her lover over her stepson's safety, then compounded the betrayal by helping plan their escape funding. Some breaks in trust couldn't be repaired. As they drove home, to a new house on the other side of town, Far from the crime scene their old home had become, Cody reflected on the completeness of his victory. Quinn would die in solitary confinement. Roseanne would spend her prime years in federal prison. Both would lose everything they tried to steal. But justice, Cody had learned, required more than legal consequences. That evening, he made 2 phone calls. The first was to a contact at ADX Florence, a guard who owed him favors from their time serving together in Iraq. The second was to a woman at FCI Dublin who understood that some debts followed people behind bars. Quinn and Roseanne had legal protection now. What they didn't have was the kind of protection that money couldn't buy and lawyers couldn't provide. The reckoning was nearly complete. Chapter 8. Permanent Solutions. 1 year after the sentencing, Cody received 2 pieces of news that confirmed his understanding of how justice actually worked in the real world. The first came via a brief phone call from ADX Florence. Quinn Krause had been found dead in his cell, apparently the victim of a heart attack brought on by stress and poor health. The official report noted that he'd been suffering from depression and had repeatedly complained of chest pains that medical staff attributed to anxiety. No autopsy would be performed. Budget constraints and the obvious cause of death made it unnecessary. What the report didn't mention was that Quinn had spent his final months in a state of constant terror. The isolation at ADX was designed to break the human spirit, but Quinn's particular torment had been more personal. Somehow, despite the facility's extreme security, he'd received regular messages from other inmates who knew exactly what he'd done to an 8-year-old boy. The messages weren't threats, they were promises. Detailed descriptions of what child abusers experienced in general population. Stories about previous cases where protective custody had failed. Reminders that even in Supermax, guards sometimes made mistakes. Quinn had requested transfer to another facility 17 times. Each request had been denied for administrative reasons that didn't quite make sense. He tried to commit suicide twice, but ADX was designed to prevent even that escape. Instead, he'd lived in constant fear until his body finally surrendered to the stress. The second piece of news came 3 days later from FCI Dublin. Roseanne Brewer had been killed during what the warden described as an altercation with another inmate over television programming. The other inmate, a woman serving time for killing her abusive ex-husband, claimed self-defense when Roseanne had attacked her with an improvised weapon. Security cameras had mysteriously malfunctioned during the incident, and no other inmates had witnessed the altercation. The investigation concluded that Roseanne had been the aggressor, which meant no additional charges would be filed. She'd been buried in a pauper's grave since no family members had claimed the body. Cody read both reports while drinking coffee on his back porch, watching Dino practice batting in their new backyard. The boy was thriving, straight A's in school, nightmares decreasing in frequency, and absolutely no memory problems despite what the doctors had initially feared about trauma-induced cognitive issues. Emma, Roseanne's daughter, was doing equally well with her grandmother in Virginia. The old woman had been horrified to learn about her daughter's crimes and had immediately filed for full custody. The girl was young enough that the details had been kept from her. She knew only that her mother had made bad choices and wouldn't be coming home for a long time. "Dad," Dino called from the yard. "Can we go fishing this weekend?" "Absolutely," Cody replied. "Just you and me." That evening, Cody made one final phone call related to the case. Major Clayton answered on the first ring. "I heard Quinn Krause died of natural causes," Clayton said without preamble. Apparently, the stress of incarceration was too much for his system. "Tragic," Cody replied. "I also heard Roseanne got into a fight with the wrong woman." Prison can be dangerous for people who hurt children. Unfortunately, protective custody isn't always protective enough. They spoke for a few more minutes about Dino's progress in school and Cody's plans to retire from active duty next year. Neither man mentioned that favors had been called in, that debts accumulated over 20 years of military service had been spent to ensure permanent justice. Some conversations didn't need to be explicit. The next morning, Cody drove to Dino's school for a parent-teacher conference. Mrs. Lila English, his son's third-grade teacher, had requested a meeting to discuss Dino's remarkable improvement over the past year. "He's like a different child," she explained, showing Cody samples of Dino's artwork and writing assignments. The trauma counseling has helped enormously, but I think what's made the biggest difference is his sense of security. He knows he's safe now. Safe. It was a simple word that encompassed everything Cody had fought for over the past 18 months. His son was safe because the people who'd threatened him were permanently removed from the equation. Not transferred, not paroled, not given second chances to hurt other children. Removed. He talks about you constantly, Mrs. English continued. How you're a soldier who protects people. How you came home to save him. You're his hero. Cody felt an emotion he'd almost forgotten existed. Pride without reservation. For 20 years, he'd served his country by killing enemies in foreign lands. But this mission, protecting his son from domestic predators, felt like the most important service he'd ever performed. That afternoon, he picked Dino up from school and drove to their favorite ice cream shop. As they sat sharing a sundae, his son asked the question that Cody had been expecting for months. Dad, what happened to Quinn and Mom? Cody had prepared for this conversation, consulting with child psychologists about how much truth an 8-year-old could handle. The answer was surprisingly simple. Enough truth to understand that justice had been served, but not so much that he'd feel responsible for their fates. They both died in prison, Cody said gently. Quinn got sick from stress, and your mom got into a fight with another prisoner. They can't hurt anyone anymore. Dino considered this while carefully eating around the cherry on top of their sundae. Are you sad about Mom? I'm sad about the person I thought she was, Cody answered honestly. But I'm not sad that she can't make bad choices anymore. Me neither, Dino said with the brutal honesty of childhood. She knew he was hurting me, and she didn't stop him. That's not what moms are supposed to do. No, Cody thought it definitely wasn't. As they finished their ice cream and headed home, Cody reflected on the completeness of his mission. Quinn Krause and Roseanne Brewer were dead. Their deaths officially ruled as unrelated incidents that had nothing to do with the husband and father they'd betrayed. The evidence trail led nowhere. The favors had been repaid, and the debts had been settled. Most importantly, Dino was safe, thriving, and learning that some people in the world could be trusted to keep their promises about protection. The war was over. His family had won. Chapter 9, New Beginnings. 2 years after the bank robbery, Cody stood in the kitchen of their new house, making pancakes while Dino set the table for breakfast. Sunlight streamed through windows that looked out on a garden they'd planted together. Tomatoes, peppers, and a small herb section that the boy tended with religious devotion. The house was everything their old home hadn't been. Secure, peaceful, and completely free of haunted memories. Cody had chosen the location carefully, a quiet neighborhood with excellent schools, where his reputation as a decorated veteran made him a respected neighbor rather than a curiosity. Dad, Coach Blake wants to know if you can help with baseball practice next week, Dino said, pouring orange juice with the careful concentration of a 10-year-old trying not to spill. I'll be there, Cody promised. What position are you playing now? Pitcher. Coach says I have good control. Control. It was a word that had different meanings in their house than in most families. For Dino, it meant mastering his curveball and learning to place the ball exactly where he wanted it. For Cody, it meant ensuring that his son grew up understanding that some people could be trusted completely while others revealed their true nature only under pressure. The boy had processed his trauma with the resilience of youth, aided by excellent counseling and the absolute security of knowing his father would never let anyone hurt him again. He still bore the scars on his arm. QK burned into his flesh, but they'd become something different over time. Not a mark of victimization, but proof that he'd survived and overcome. Cody's phone buzzed with a text from Major Clayton. Package pickup at 1,400 hours. Standard protocols. The message was code for their monthly check-in at a safe house near Fort Bragg. Since retiring from active duty, Cody had transitioned into private contract work, the kind of missions that required a particular skill set, but couldn't be officially acknowledged by any government agency. The work was lucrative and satisfying in ways that conventional employment couldn't match. When corporate executives needed problems solved permanently, when foreign assets required protection that couldn't be provided through official channels, when justice required services that courts couldn't deliver. They called Cody strong. His reputation in those circles was built on two principles: absolute discretion and permanent solutions. The clients who hired him weren't interested in rehabilitation or second chances. They wanted problems erased completely and professionally. "Will you be home for dinner?" Dino asked, interrupting his thoughts. "Always," Cody replied. "We have a rule about that, remember? Family dinner every night unless you're saving the world." And am I saving the world today? Dino considered this with mock seriousness. "Probably. You usually are." At 2 p.m., Cody arrived at the safe house to find Clayton waiting with a new dossier. The target was a human trafficking coordinator who'd been moving children through military bases using forged dependent IDs. 3 previous attempts to prosecute him had failed due to evidence mysteriously disappearing and witnesses recanting their testimony. "He's got protection at federal level," Clayton explained. "Someone with enough influence to make cases disappear. Local law enforcement is frustrated, FBI is handcuffed by politics, and meanwhile kids keep disappearing." Cody studied the photographs and background information with professional interest. The target, Reynaldo Beard, operated from a compound in South Carolina that was technically a religious retreat but functioned as a processing center for trafficked children. His network included corrupt officials, compromised social workers, and enough legitimate religious cover to deflect casual investigation. "How many kids?" Cody asked. "Unknown. Conservative estimate based on disappearances and witness reports. At least 40 over the past 3 years. 40 children. Some of them probably Dino's age when the trafficking started." Timeline. Client wants this resolved before his operation expands into North Carolina. Apparently, Beard has been scouting locations near military bases here. The mission was exactly the kind of work Cody had specialized in during his contract career. High-value target, significant collateral benefit, and the kind of justice that courts couldn't deliver due to systemic corruption. Fee: $2 million, plus expenses and cleanup. Cody closed the dossier. "I'll need 2 weeks for reconnaissance and planning." The client was hoping for something faster. The client can hope for a lot of things. Professional work takes professional timelines. That evening, over dinner at their kitchen table, Dino told him about a new kid at school, a quiet boy named Xavier who'd been placed with a foster family after his parents had abandoned him. The other kids were being mean because Xavier was behind in his studies and wore clothes that didn't fit properly. "I told him he could sit with us at lunch," Dino said. "Is that okay?" "Of course it's okay. What else did you do?" "I gave him half my sandwich because he didn't have much food, and I asked Mrs. English if she had any extra supplies for kids who need them." Cody felt that familiar surge of pride. His son was developing into exactly the kind of person who deserved protection from predators like Reynaldo Beard. "You did the right thing," he said. "Taking care of people who can't protect themselves is important work. Like what you do. Exactly like what I do." Later that night, after Dino was asleep, Cody sat on their back porch planning his approach to the South Carolina mission. The target was well protected and politically connected, but he'd also made the fatal mistake of expanding his operation into Cody's operational area. Some people never learned that there were men in the world who treated child predators as legitimate targets of war. Reynaldo Beard was about to receive an education in the difference between federal protection and professional elimination. As Cody studied satellite photos of the compound and began calculating approach routes, he reflected on how perfectly his life had arranged itself. During the day, he was a devoted father who coached Little League and attended school plays. At night, he eliminated threats to children who didn't have fathers capable of protecting them. Quinn Krause and Roseanne Brewer had been personal, justice for his own family's betrayal. But Reynaldo Beard represented something larger. Proof that some people forfeited their right to exist when they chose to prey on children. The mission would begin tomorrow with reconnaissance flights and electronic surveillance. Within 2 weeks, 40 missing children would be avenged, and one trafficking network would be permanently dismantled. Cody Strong had found his purpose in life, protecting children who couldn't protect themselves and eliminating predators who thought they were beyond the reach of justice. It was the kind of work that let him sleep peacefully every night, knowing that his son lived in a world where some evils met permanent endings. The war continued, but now he was fighting for the right side on the battlefield that mattered most. Epilogue. 5 years later, Dino Strong graduated as valedictorian of his 8th grade class and announced his intention to follow his father's path into military service. The scars on his arm had faded to thin white lines that he wore like badges of honor, proof that he'd survived and overcome. Cody watched from the audience, wearing civilian clothes, but maintaining the bearing of a man who dedicated his life to protecting innocence from evil. In the past 5 years, his contract work had eliminated 17 high-value targets involved in child trafficking, domestic terrorism, and other crimes that official channels couldn't address. Each mission had been planned with the same precision he'd once brought to military operations, executed with the same professional competence, and concluded with the same permanent results. His reputation in certain circles was legendary. When conventional justice failed, when courts were compromised, when the system couldn't protect its most vulnerable citizens, Cody Strong could be trusted to provide permanent solutions. The work had made him wealthy, but more importantly, it had given him purpose beyond simple revenge. Quinn Krause and Roseanne